Yo, what's up guys? Alf here, and today I'm going to be doing a full in-depth deck breakdown of a deck that I've recently used to hit rank 8 with on the arena ladder. As you can see from the untapped screenshot, I'm currently 27-3 with this deck, so it's been performing really well for me. And now before I get into it, there's going to be an MTG zone link down in the description. If you click on that, you'll have the full deck list there that you can import into arena if you want to try the deck out for yourself. But anyway, with that all out of the way, this is my blue-white Leyline binding control deck in Historic. Now control as an archetype in general has kind of fallen off in Historic recently, but there's been two really great additions to the deck that I definitely think make it worth revisiting, and they are Leyline Binding and Kalimjin Emperor. So we'll start off by having a look at these cards. Leyline Binding is a 6-mana enchantment with flash, costs 1 less to cast for each basic land type among lands you control, and when it enters the battlefield, exile target non-land opponent and opponent controls until it leaves the battlefield. So this is huge because it's basically a much better version of March of Otherworldly Light if you can consistently reduce the cost of this down to 2 or 3 mana. Now obviously we're a pure blue-white deck, but because of that, that enables us to run some off-colour lands. So we've got all 3 of the blue-white triomes which can produce a 3rd colour, and we've got all 3 of the blue and X shock lands as well. And with this setup, you know, there's basically no cost in the mana base because we can still run all of these 12 good blue-white dual lands. All of the triomes still produce blue-white as well, so the only real downside here is we have to pay a bit of extra mana for these shock lands, and we may be running 1 or 2 more triomes than we normally would, but that's really not much of an issue because the payoff of being able to cast Leyline Binding consistently for 2 or 3 mana, or even 1 mana in the mid to late game once we have all 5 colours is huge. So like I said, Leyline Binding basically feels like a much better March of Otherworldly Light. March was very good in the control decks because it's exile removal, which is great against stuff that interacts with the graveyard, and indestructible effects. It's good that can take out all creatures, artifacts and enchantments. But the big drawback of March was that it was very expensive to take out more expensive spells, which meant, especially if you're going second, you basically had to tap out to use March, or sometimes even have to exile white cards from your hand. Whereas Leyline Binding is always going to cost, 1, 2 or 3 mana, regardless of how big the thing it's killing is. The other huge upgrade of Leyline Binding is that it can also hit Planeswalkers. March was very weak in the mirror match because it couldn't hit Planeswalkers. And it also meant the deck was very weak to other decks running Planeswalkers, like Rakdos or Jund Midrange. Once they land a Chandra or a Liliana, it was very difficult for you to deal with that without tucking it with a Teferi or attacking it with Wandering Emperor tokens. So the fact that Leyline Binding gives you a clean answer to Planeswalkers as well is such a big upgrade. The fact that you can reduce it down to 2 mana pretty consistently by turn 5 also makes it really good with Teferi, because you can play Teferi, +1, untap, have 2 lands, and then use Leyline Binding to kill anything. So Binding is such a big upgrade to the deck. The other great thing about it is that not many decks are running enchantment removal right now. The only decks that are really typically going to be running it are, in the mirror match they run March of Otherworldly Light, but it's going to cost them 7 mana, which is a lot. And obviously some green decks will be running Beside You as well, but outside of that, especially game 1, this is basically count as unconditional removal, and even post sideboard, not many decks are running enchantment removal anyway, so this usually counts as hard removal, and we can also protect it with counter spells as well. The other really nice thing about it is that post sideboard against aggro decks, it also combos with Fragment Reality, because we can Fragment Reality our own Leyline Binding to cheat Lyra into play, but I'm going to go more into that when I get to the sideboard. But either way, Leyline Binding, such a great addition to the deck that fixes a lot of the problems of the deck. Then the second big new addition is Kalimjin Emperor, 6 mana 5/6 with Flying and Ward 2, and then the rest of it has a lot of text, but occasionally we're going to be hard casting it. But for the most part, the way the rest of the card works is you pay 2 and discard it, and tap up to 1 target permanent the opponent controls and draw a card. So it basically cycles and taps down an opponent's thing. Almost always you're going to be tapping down the opponent's creatures with this, so you want to activate it before they go to their combat phase. And then once you do that, it conjures another one in the deck 7th from the top, and once you do that 3 times with different Kalims, assuming the opponent doesn't interact with your graveyard, you get to put it onto the battlefield for free. So this is huge for a number of reasons. The first really big upside of this card is that it's an ability rather than a spell. So that means that it doesn't get affected by stuff like Esper Sentinel or Thalia, and it also can't be stopped by counter magic. So the first thing that it can't be stopped by Esper Sentinel and Thalia is huge, because one of the biggest risks of running control in the current metagame is there's obviously humans and Esper Greasefang, which both run 4 Esper Sentinel, 4 Thalia, which makes it very difficult for them to interact with early. But the fact that this is an ability and not a spell means that it's not affected, so you can still tap down the opponent's stuff, buy yourself some tempo, reduce the amount of damage you're taking, and then after you've done it 3 times, getting a creature into play is huge. And that part in particular is very, very strong in the mirror match as well, because it can't be stopped by counter spells. So once you do this 3 times, you basically get a 5/6 with Flying and Ward on the battlefield that the opponent can't stop if they're running counter spells as well. So Kalim, very good at stabilizing against the the aggro decks. You know, it draws you a card, so it always replaces itself, and then once you do it 3 times, you get this 5/6 in play, which you can use either to defend yourself if you're on the back foot against aggro, or the fact it has 5 power is huge because it presents a 4-turn clock immediately. I think one of the biggest weaknesses of control in general is that it can often take too long to close the games out, and with a lot of decks in the format have really good ways to recover, so the longer you give another deck, the more chances you get of them drawing like an expressive iteration or a thought monitor or something to get them back in the game. So the fact that you can start, you know, presenting a 4-turn clock out of nowhere really helps to close out games and puts pressure on the opponent, which is really, really huge. So I'm a really big fan of Kaleem. Very good at buying you tempo in the early game, and then helps to close games out pretty quickly as well. Then the rest of the cards, we'll start off by having a look at the bottom of the curve. 1 copy of Search for Escancer, so Legendary Enchantment. You can look at the top card of your library during your upkeep and put it into the graveyard or keep it on top, and then once you have 7 or more cards in your graveyard, you can transform it into Escancer the Sunken Ruin, legendary land that taps for a blue, and then you can pay 3 and tap it to look at the top 4 cards of your library. You may reveal a non-creature, non-land card from among them and put it into your hand. So I really like this as a one-off because it's very strong in the slower matchups. This is such a powerful card in the mirror match because if you can, you know, getting it down on turn 2 means that it's going to go underneath a lot of the opponent's counter magic. Once it flips, you know, you can still hold up your counter magic every single turn. And then if the opponent doesn't do anything, you can just pump your mana into this and generate card advantage every turn. You know, while we're talking about that, that's another big reason why I really like Leyline Binding and Kaleem. They're both instant speed interactions, so you can still hold up your counter magic, and then if the opponent doesn't do anything, you can still do Kaleem or Leyline Binding as well. Same sort of thing with Escancer. Even outside of control, it's also very good at helping in the mid-range matchup, specifically against Rakdos and Jund. They're going to have a lot of discard spells, so if you can land this, it's a really great way to recover because you can just activate it at the end of the opponent's turn and kind of recover on card advantage once they've stripped your hands with Thoughtseize and Inquisitions and stuff like that. I do slide it out most times against aggro, but even game 1 against aggro, playing this on turn 2 helps you dig for your sweepers and your removal and stuff like that, so I really like Escancer as a one-off. I don't think it's worth running more than 1 though, because the second copy does have pretty severe diminishing returns. Even if you manage to transform the first one, since they're both legendary, the best you're going to get out of the second copy of it is just looking at the top card of your library and putting it into the graveyard. So I think this is definitely a card you don't want to run more than 1 of, but as a one-off, I really like it to improve the slower matchups. Then we've got 4 copies of Seek New Knowledge. It's 2 mana instant. Seek 2 non-land cards, then put a card from your hand on the bottom of your library. So this is basically the card advantage spell of choice that I'm running, and I really like this because it's basically draw 2, put 1 back, but the 2 that you get are guaranteed to be gas. You know, you can't hit lands off this, which means that, assuming you're hitting land drops, this is always going to find you gas. Now, the obvious on the flip side, the big downside of this is that if you're missing land drops, it's not going to help you find lands. But we're running 27 lands, partially because of this, partially because we do want to be able to run more triomes to enable Leyline Binding. But with 27 lands and Archmage's Charm, Kaleem and Shark Typhoon all being able to draw us cards in the early game, I really like Seek New Knowledge because it basically turns one of your lands into 2 really good cards, and you're guaranteed to hit great stuff off this. So like I said, as long as you're not missing land drops, this is really, really strong. It also enables you to run fewer of your payoff cards. You know, we're only running 3 to Fairy, mainly because, you know, you don't really want to be overloading on 5 drops too much, or you can end up with clunky hands. You know, you don't really want to be drawing multiples of Teferi, especially in the early game. So Seek New Knowledge allows you to run 3 and still be able to find it consistently. So I'm a big fan of this card just because it's guaranteed to find you gas, assuming you hit lands. One thing to be wary of with this card is, normally when you're playing control, it's usually correct to just play all your lands out, but if you have enough mana, you should always hold at least 1 land in your hand, so that if you draw a Seek New Knowledge, you get to seek 2 non-land cards, and then you can just put that dead land back into your deck as well. Another nice advantage as well is, like I said, we can cheat Lyra into play with Fragment Reality, so if we draw it, we can also put it back with Seek New Knowledge, which is nice, but I really like this as card advantage that's guaranteed to hit you gas, basically. Then we've got 2 copies of Dovin's Veto, 2 mana, can't be countered, counter target non-creature spell, so obviously Archmage's Charm is the main counter spell in the deck, but I felt like I wanted to run a couple of extra counter spells, and I really like Dovin's Veto because most of the stuff that you actively want to counter is non-creature spells, you know, stuff like Planeswalkers or big instants or sorceries for the most part. You know, we have a lot of stuff to be able to deal with the opponent's creatures in Divine Purge, Wandering Emperor, Leyline Binding and Kaleem, so I really like Veto at stopping, you know, more problematic stuff like Planeswalkers as well. I did consider running Sense or Droid Disruption in this slot, but The other really nice thing about Veto is, it's good at all points in the game, and I'd also want to be running 4 copies of Dovin's Veto across the main and the sideboard anyway, so running 2 copies of Dovin's Veto in the main kind of frees up 2 more sideboard slots as well, which is really nice. Then we've got 4 copies of Divine Purge as my sweeper of choice, 3 mana, exile all artifacts and creatures with mana value 3 or less. They perpetually gain this spell cost 2 more to cast, and this permanent enters the battlefield tapped, and for as long as each of them remain exiled, it's only may play it. So I really like this as my sweeper of choice in control right now. First of all, because it's really strong against Affinity. I think Affinity is probably the best deck in the format right now, and Divine Purge is just an absolute blowout against them because it gets rid of all of their cheap artifacts. They have artifact lands as well, which this also exiles, which is really huge. So this is just a complete blowout in the Affinity matchup. But the other huge advantage of this is that it's just a 3-mana sweeper that buys you tons of time. I think recently, Historic has got a lot faster. The most popular and powerful aggro deck right now is it Wizards, which is really, really efficient and fast. With the addition of the new Lords from Dominaria United, Elves, Goblins and Merfolk have all got a lot faster as well. So the difference between 3 and 4 mana on your sweepers is huge. Going second, I think Supreme Verdict is often too slow against those decks. So Divine Purge, really huge there as well. The fact that it can't kill 4-mana creatures does come up very occasionally against decks like Phoenix, but we have so many ways to deal with bigger creatures in Wandering Emperor, Leyline Binding and Teferi that's not really that much of an issue. Plus Kaleem can tap them down as well, so 4-mana creatures isn't really much of an issue. And like I said, the fact that this is 3 mana is really huge. Speaking of Kaleem as well, it's nice that this doesn't kill Kaleem. One of the disadvantages of running Supreme Verdict is that if you do get Kaleem into play off the cycle ability, Supreme Verdict will kill it, whereas if you have Kaleem in play, Divine Purge doesn't kill it as well. And the obvious downside of Divine Purge is the opponent does get to replay those cards that they get exiled later in the game, but you have such a strong late game that if it gets to a point where the opponent is having to replay cards from the exile zone, you're going to be so far ahead at that point that it just doesn't matter anymore. So Divine Purge, really sick card, great against Affinity, very good against the aggro decks as well. Then we've got 4 copies of Archmage's Charm, so this is obviously a staple in all the control decks right now. Really, really good counter spell. So 3 mana, choose one of the modes, counter target spell, draw 2 cards, or gain control of target non-land permanent with mana value 1 or less. So if you have a look at our mana base, every single land in the deck can produce blue, which is really important. I did previously run control decks where you could have like one off-color, one non-blue land, like something like an Iganjo, but if that was in your first 3 lands, it meant that you can't cast Archmage's Charm on turn 3, which is a really issue. So I really like running all blue lands so that you can consistently cast Archmage's Charm on turn 3. Obviously, the hard counter is one of the main reasons that we're running this card. The ability to counter anything for 3 mana is really huge. Very good once you have stabilized at just shutting out anything the opponent might do. The fact you can also draw 2 cards is really good if you need to dig for stuff. If you're missing land drops, for example, that's really good. And the ability to gain control of target non-land permanent with mana value 1 or less is also really relevant right now as well, because the aggressive decks have become much lower curve, much more efficient. So, against Is It Wizards, for example, you can use this to take control of a Symmetry Sage or a Soulscar Mage. You can take control of Esper Sentinels with this, and it can also take control of other non-creature permanents as well. So, if you're up against a deck like Helioke and they have a Johnny's Welcome, or you're up against Affinity and you want to take like a Moonsnare prototype or a Shadow Spear for some reason, you can do that as well. So, Archmage's Charm, incredibly flexible. 3 mana counterspell is obviously very key for the control archetype in general to stop stuff that has really powerful into the battlefield stuff. Very good to fight on the stack, and the fact that you can draw 2 cards when you need to is very powerful as well. Then we've got 3 copies of Wandering Emperor, so 4 mana Planeswalker with Flash, and as long as it enters the battlefield this turn, you can activate one of its abilities. +1, put a +1/+1 counter on up to target creature against first strike. Until the end of turn, -1, create a 2/2 with Vigilance, and -2, exile target tap creature, you gain 2 life. So if you've played with or against control recently, you know how powerful this card is. The -2 is the main draw to it, because it can just exile any creature no matter how big it is, assuming it doesn't have Vigilance. So yeah, being able to flash this in, exile the creature is really huge. If they're attacking with smaller creatures, you can just make a 2/2 and block in combat with it as well. And then the following turn, you can either minus again to create another token, or if you're confident you can defend it, you can start plussing it so it sticks around and then consistently produces tokens. So this is great. It's basically removal on a body that sticks around that can produce tokens later. The tokens having Vigilance means that you can pressure the opponent and have them back on defense at the same time as well. And the fact you can give those tokens first strike also means the opponent often can't block you as well. So Wandering Emperor, incredibly powerful card since it acts as removal and kind of a win condition as well. Then we've got Teferi. Obviously, again, if you played with or against control, you know how powerful this card is. 5 mana Planeswalker, enters with 4 loyalty. +1, draw a card at the beginning of your end step, untap 2 lands. -3, put target non-land permanent into its owner's library third from top, and then -8, you get an emblem with whenever you draw a card, exile target permanent opponent controls. So obviously this is the top end card of our deck, and the really nice thing about this deck is we have a lot of cards that cost 2 mana or work with 2 mana so that we can defend Teferi the turn we play it. So we've got Leyline Binding, assuming we can get it down to 2 mana. Kaleem can tap something down. We've got Veto and Seek New Knowledge that can dig for stuff as well. So we have a lot of good options to protect Teferi the turn it comes down. You know, if we have 3 mana available after we untap, we also have Archmage's Charm as well. So we have a lot of ways to defend it on the +1. The -3 being able to temporarily deal with any permanent is great. You know, now between Leyline Binding and, you know, Teferi, we have a lot of ways to deal with any permanents the opponent might have. And then obviously if we ever hit the ultimate, we're basically guaranteed to win the game. So Teferi basically just runs away with the game whenever we play it. Obviously most control decks want to be running 4, but like I've said, with Seek New Knowledge being able to dig for it consistently, and I also didn't want to have too many clunky hands where we have 2 copies of Teferi, I feel like 3 is a good amount. We're going to be able to find it consistently enough off the back of Seek New Knowledge as well, which is really huge. And then finally, Shark Typhoon, 6 mana enchantment. If you hardcast it, whenever you cast a non-creature spell, create an XX blue shark creature token with flying, where X is that spell's mana value. Now, for the most part, I think it's a trap to hardcast this, but there definitely are some situations where you want to do so. But for the most part, you usually want to cycle it. So you can cycle it for X and 1 and a blue, and whenever you cycle it, you create an XX blue shark creature token with flying. So this is really huge because similar to Kaleem, it's an activated ability when you cycle it, so it doesn't get taxed by Esper Sentinel or Thalia. You know, it doesn't get countered by regular counter spells or anything. So this is really huge, similar to Kaleem, at being able to stabilize and buy you tempo against those Esper Sentinel Thalia decks. Very good at just producing blockers out of nowhere against the aggro deck in the early game. Even on turn 2, if you just need to keep drawing, you can just cycle it away to draw. And then as you get into the later game, you know, when you can start making 5/5, 6/6 sharks at instant speed out of nowhere, that's really great to be able to close the game out and to just ambush creatures in combat. And like I said, on the flip side, there are some situations where you do just want to hardcast it, and against a lot of decks, that's just going to win you the game as well. So Shark Typhoon, really great in the early game at just cycling, producing chump blockers, and then as the game goes on, it just acts as a win condition as well. And between Shark Typhoon, Kaleem, and Hall of Storm Giants, this particular build is much better at turning the corner and closing the game out quickly, which, like I said, I think is a big weakness of previous control decks. Now onto the mana base, 27 lands has felt like a good amount. I like 27 here because it allows us to run slightly more triomes without missing land drops. You know, the issue with running 6 triomes in a control deck if you're running 26 lands is that you'll have a lot of tapped lands, whereas 27 with 6 triomes means that you're more likely to flood out, but we have a lot of ways to mitigate flood, especially with Seek New Knowledge. So I like 27. If I was going to 26, I think Seek New Knowledge becomes more of a liability because you don't want to be at a point where you're missing land drops and you can't draw for them with the Seek New Knowledge. Like I said, all of the lands produce blue for Archmage's Charm. We got all the good blue-white dual lands in the triomes, and the off-color lands for Leyline Binding, obviously. Then the other lands, Hall of Storm Giants, like I said, very, very good at closing games out. I could potentially see going up to 2 of this instead of Otawara, but as things stand, I like the 1. But this, in combination with Kaleem and Shark Typhoon, really helps to put, you know, the opponent on often a 2 or 3 turn clock out of nowhere, which is really huge. I feel like a single basic island is very important because Field of Ruin is still run, as is Assassin's Trophy out of Jund decks sometimes, and I have seen some weird Cleansing Wildfire decks knocking about as well, so I think you do need 1 basic to hedge against that. And then got a single copy of Otawara here, is just a land that also acts as extra interaction, you know, extra protection against flood when we need it as well. So I think the mana base is good. I think if you went lower than 27 lands, you'd probably want to look at running something else other than Seek New Knowledge for your card advantage engine. But in general, you know, I'm super happy with the mana base. It enables Leyline Binding consistently enough, and I'm super happy with the main deck in general. It feels like it addresses a lot of the issues that controllers had recently. Now onto the sideboard, 4 copies of Fragment Reality, so 1 mana instant, exile target non-token artifacts, creature or enchantment. Its controller puts a random creature with lesser mana value from their library onto the battlefield tapped. So this is really nice as an extra removal spell against the aggro decks. Like I said earlier, a lot of the aggro decks are becoming much more efficient and faster. There's a lot of aggro decks running a lot of 1-drops as well, and this is so good against 1-drops, you know, against Izzet Wizards, being able to take out Symmetry Sage or Soulscar Mage on turn 1 before it can deal a bunch of damage is huge. You know, against Affinity, it's great at taking out one of their 1-mana artifacts. You can also use this to take out their artifact lands, which is a complete blowout in the early game as well. And even if you do have to use this to take out bigger creatures creatures, it's just really good as a tempo play against aggro, because the creature they get from the deck is largely going to be worse than the one they have, and it enters the battlefield tapped as well. And like I said, this deck has such a strong late game that you're just trying to buy yourself tempo until you can reach that late game. So Fragment Reality, really good as an efficient answer for the smaller creatures, and like I said earlier, it also combos well with Leyline Binding, because we can Fragment Reality our own Leyline Binding at instant speed to cheat Lyra Dawnbringer into play. So Lyra, 5 mana 5/5, flying first strike lifelink, and so if we have Leyline Binding in play, you know, say we use it to kill or to exile one of the opponent's early creatures, we can Fragment Reality our own Leyline Binding at instant speed, so we can still hold up counter magic and all other removal, and if the opponent doesn't do anything, we can Fragment Reality our Leyline Binding, get Lyra into play as early as turn 3, and this is just a complete way to shut the game out against aggro, because 5/5 flying first strike lifelink is basically impossible for them to attack past. The opponent's also likely to have boarded out creature removal against us going into games 2 or 3, so they're not really going to have many ways to deal with this. And against decks that have good reach in the late game, like Izzet Wizards with burn spells or sacrifice decks, if you're at a low life total, this just completely puts those games out of reach by buffering your life total a lot as well. So Fragment Reality works really nicely as additional removal against aggro decks, and also a way to cheat Lyra into play off Leyline Binding, which is huge. We've got 2 copies of Rest in Peace as Graveyard Hay. I think this is really strong right now because a lot of the decks that interact with the graveyard kind of rely on most interaction being unlicensed hearse, and Rest in Peace really takes advantage of those sorts of decks. You know, I've seen a lot of Grixis Death Shadow with Founding the Third Path and Luris recently. Obviously, Izzet Phoenix is still a deck. Jund decks running Croxer, this shuts off Tarmogoyf and Croxer as well, so Rest in Peace really good against the graveyard decks. Now obviously it does shut off Search for Azcanta and the Kaleem cycle ability, or the ability to bring it back from the graveyard, but against the decks that we're bringing it in against, it's going to hurt the opponent much more than it's hurting us. Then Lyra we've already gone over, but just very good once the opponent's boarded out their creature removal, very good to be able to cheat into play with Fragment Reality, and just puts those games out of reach if we do get it into play. And we got 2 more copies of Davin's Veto, mainly for the control matchup. Basically, any decks that are running non-creature spells that we want to be able to counter. Mystical Dispute is really nice for a number of reasons. So again, similar to Davin's Veto, it's very good in the mirror match as a way to win counter wars, force our plays through. But even outside of that, it's also very good against the blue creature decks as well. Stuff like Merfolk is a very tough matchup. Mystical Dispute gives you a very efficient way of answering their creatures on the stack. Similarly, you know, you could bring this in against Phoenix and Wizards as well. And additionally, if you need more hard counter spells, it can also be brought in. So Goblins, in addition to Merfolk, is probably one of the tougher matchups for this deck. And you want to have a high density of ways of stopping Muxus. Obviously, in the main deck, we only have Archmage's Charm. But against Goblins, I like bringing in 2 more Mystical Disputes. Even though it's not the most efficient counter spell, it's still pretty good at stopping Muxus as well. So Dispute, very good in a number of matchups. And then we've got 2 copies of Supreme Verdict as additional sweepers. So 4 mana destroy all creatures, this can't be countered. So like I said, I think for the most part Divine Purge is the much better sweeper simply because it costs a less mana, but having additional sweepers against the go wide decks like humans, goblins, elves, merfolk is really huge, and the fact that this can't be countered is very relevant against decks like merfolk that are going to be having cards like Spell Pierce against you as well. So anyway, that's the deck. I've been really happy with it. I think Leyline Binding and Kaleem really help to improve the matchups against the Esper Sentinel Thalia decks, as well as giving you more efficient ways to kill Planeswalkers off Leyline Binding, which really help to improve the matchup against the Rakdos decks as well. So I'm a really big fan of this deck. I think if you're playing Control, this is definitely the sort of direction you should be going into right now. Next up, I've got some gameplay. I've got 5 matches that I was playing with this deck, so you guys can see it on the ladder. If you've got any questions about the deck at all, drop me a comment below, and I hope you enjoy the gameplay. Big up. Okay, sweet, here we go. Okay, so we're going second here. And yeah, I think this hand's fine. You know, we've got early interaction in form of counter spells. We've got Shark Typhoons to hopefully dig for more lands. I was going to say this hand is potentially a bit of a liability against fast aggressive decks because we don't have any creature removal, but I think in the dark this is a fine hand to keep. Okay, so it looks like opponents on Black-White Angels, which I think should be a good matchup for us overall. The only card we're really concerned about is Black Market Connections. Okay, so we didn't draw our 3rd land, but drawing Divine Purge is pretty nice. And we have Veto up if they do have connections here, so... Okay, they do have connections. Very glad we have the Veto there. I would have liked to cycle the Shark Typhoon to try and hit our 3rd land here if possible. We are running 27 lands though, so I think we're pretty likely to keep hitting lands here, which we do, which is great. Now we could Purge here, but I think we can probably afford to wait a turn. I like keeping Archmage's Charm up in just in case they play something like another Black Market Connections. If they don't and they just play more creatures, I think we're happy to just let them do it. Draw off Shark Typhoon or Charm and then Divine Purge next turn. Okay, they attack. See if they have a Righteous Valkyrie or a Resplendent Angel here. Okay, they don't. So we're definitely going to be drawing off one of these cards here. We could draw 2 off the Archmage's Charm, but I like just cycling the Shark Typhoon and potentially holding the Archmage's Charm for later after we've used Divine Purge. Okay, that's pretty rough. We didn't hit another land. I think we're kind of forced to Divine Purge here, which is, it does give the opponent a window to play another Black Market Connections potentially, but I think we kind of have to. Well, we do, okay. So that kind of sucks. We do have Leyline Binding as an answer, but unfortunately we haven't drawn any of our off-color lands yet. And we miss another land. I think we're forced to just draw 2 here. We really need to try and hit more land drops. Even though we're not in a great position here, like, we do have ways to recover. They don't have anything on board yet. We have Leyline Binding as an answer to Black Market Connections. And we have Wandering Emperor to deal with their creatures as well. I mean, missing land drops has kind of, put us pretty far behind here, but the good thing about Angels is they're not particularly fast at closing the game out, so it does give us quite a few opportunities here to get back in the game. Okay, they've got Resplendent Angel, which is kind of scary. I mean, they don't have a Bishop of Wings or anything like that, but we do need to be wary of that potentially making tokens. Now, we could Leyline Binding the Black Market Connections, but I think I'm more interested in just passing the turn and potentially exiling Resplendent Angel with the Wandering Emperor here, because they're going to be gaining 2 life off the Soul Wardens. If they play 2 creatures, that's going to trigger the Resplendent Angel this turn, so I think we need to try and exile it before they do so. Okay, there's a Youthful Valkyrie, so if they have another creature here, they're going to be triggering the Resplendent Angel, so I think we do need to just go for Wandering Emperor here. I assume they attack with the Resplendent Angel here. Yeah, okay, they do have another Youthful Valkyrie, so very glad that we held up the Wandering Emperor here. So let's see what they attack. Okay, so they're playing around Shark Typhoon, which is really good for us. That buys us even more time. So we'll exile the Resplendent Angel here. Okay, and we hit Rafine's Tower, which is pretty nice because now that reduces the cost of Leyline Binding down to 3. I think we have to make a 2/2 off the Wandering Emperor here just to buy us a bit more time. And now I'm gonna Leyline Binding the Black Market Connections now before they get any more value off it. And even though we're pretty far behind, we do now have Seek New Knowledge, which should hope, like, ideally we want to hit Divine Purge here. And the great thing about Seek New Knowledge is we're guaranteed to hit. Okay, they got Bishop of Wings, which is fine. But yeah, we're guaranteed to hit we're guaranteed to hit non-land cards, so it gives us a much higher chance of actually finding Divine Purge here. And even if we don't, we have Archmage's Charm that can dig for it. So I think we've got reasonable chances of finding it here. Okay, they choose not to attack with everything, which is good for us. We're definitely going to trade off in combat here. The other great thing about Divine Purge in this matchup is it plays around Bishop of Wings, because Bishop of Wings only gives them tokens when stuff's destroyed, not exiled. So I think we're just going all in to try and find Divine Purge here. Oh wow, okay, we find one straight away. I mean, that's the great thing about Seek New Knowledge, is it guarantees you're going to find something good. So we can Purge here, sweep the whole board, and then we can just play a tapped Steam Vents and hold up Archmage's Charm. And now I feel like we're in a decent position. I feel like we've stabilised now. The opponent's just top decking. We know exactly what they've got in the exile. They lead on Bishop of Wings. I think we're happy to just counter that because they're going to get 1/1 tokens whenever any of their angels die in the future, and they don't have anything else they can cast other than the Soul Warden here if they want to play from exile, which is like, just a 1/1 basically. It's not a big issue. So at this point, I feel like, normally I feel like it's a trap to hardcast the Shark Typhoon, but I feel like, they have a lot of creatures available, and they're not going to have good ways to kill the Shark Typhoon, so I feel like if we get it down at this spot, it's just going to put the game completely out of reach for the opponent, assuming we can chain together some amount of non-creature spells here. Oh wow, okay. Teferi's a sick draw. I mean, even if we didn't draw Teferi, we could have just cast Archmage's Charm to draw 2, which would put a 3/3 into play and hopefully dig to more interaction, which would make more sharks. But I do feel, had they not had all the cards in exile off Divine Purge, it might have been better to just hold up the Shark Typhoon and the Archmage's Charm as interaction. But I think since they have so many cards in exile, we do need some kind of long-term game plan to stop them just attacking with the flyers. And I think, we did have to take a turn off to cast the Shark Typhoon, but it felt worth it to just put the game out of reach. Okay, they have Bloodchief Says for Teferi. We're definitely going to counter that. We get another 3/3, and the Teferi survives here. Now they really don't have any good attacks at all. see what else they do here. Okay, they have Resplendent Angels, so that will get them a 5/5 flyer, which is a bit of an issue, but we're going to be building up a bunch of flyers of our own, so hopefully that won't end up mattering. Okay, so we could potentially tuck the Resplendent Angel here, which I think we're probably going to do because we already have flyers in play to protect the Teferi, and we have another Shark Typhoon that we can cycle here for 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, for, what is that, 8? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, yeah. Oh no, wait, is that? But yeah, either way, they don't really have good attacks here. Okay, so they attack. I think, you know, they could have black market connections, but we're happy to just go for the Shark Typhoon here. They don't really have, you know, even if they have black market connections, we have multiple ways to deal with it. You know, we could dig for Leyline binding. Plus, I think we're eventually going to take over this game off the back of this Shark Typhoon anyway, so... Okay, so they have Arganjo, they kill the 7/7, but again, this Shark Typhoon plus Teferi has put us so far ahead now, and Black Market Connections is the only card that even gets close to keeping them in the game, and I still don't think they're going to be able to beat that. Okay, so we are kind of flooding out here a little bit, which is a bit annoying. I think I'm just going to cycle the Kaleem now just to try and find something else. Plus, we're going to untap anyway off the Teferi, so this 2 mana is essentially free. Okay, Archmage's Charm is perfect. Now we have an answer to Black Market Connections. We can also just draw 2 if we need to keep drawing more gas. It's another way for us to produce Shark tokens off the Typhoon, so yeah, again, I feel pretty confident about this spot now. Okay, they keep the Resplendent Angel on top, which is probably something we're going to have to counter next turn. Okay, they play Giada. I mean, that is a card that can be problematic, but we would much rather counter the Resplendent Angel here, I think, because if we don't, that's going to immediately produce them another 5/5 token. So again, they could attack here, but we've got, you know, we could make more Sharks at instant speed, so it's very risky for them to do that. Drew another Teferi here, so now I think I don't mind minusing on the Giada and just playing a second Teferi here. You know, like I said, Giada is a threat that we'd want to deal with eventually, and since we drew a second Teferi, we might as well, you know, play it immediately so we can start plussing off this one, and we get another 5/5. Seek New Knowledge is great because we can just replace one of these lands with something good from our deck. So yeah, I feel pretty confident about this now. Okay, we drew a Kaleem and a Shark Typhoon, we can just put a land back. And then I think we can play this land tapped because we're going to be untapping anyway. This still give us access to Archmage's Charm plus Kaleem if we need it as well. So even though the opponent's at 58, we're definitely going to be winning this game now. So we'll definitely counter the Resplendent Angel, stop them getting that 5/5, gets us another Shark token in play. Yeah, sweet. Okay, so sideboarding here. Definitely want some more sweepers. Supreme Verdict should be good there. Fragment Reality and Lyra I like here as well. You know, against aggro decks I normally board like this, where I'll board out Search for Escanter, Seek New Knowledge and Veto, and just board in Fragment Reality, Supreme Verdict and Lyra. And Lyra should be good at, you know, stopping them in the air. Fragment Reality should be good at dealing with their problematic permanents. Now they obviously do get, you know, their problematic permanents are all 2 and 3 mana creatures. This might have been a loose keep, but I think, you know, we have early interaction and ways to cycle. They are going to be boarding in. If they're using my list, they're going to have 7 discard spells post sideboard, so you don't really want to mulligan too much against this deck. But yeah, Fragment Reality can deal with Soul Warden, but if you kill stuff like Giada or Bishop of Wings, you're just going to be giving them a Soul Warden, which isn't really that much of an issue. If you kill, you know, a Righteous Valkyrie, you can give them a Bishop of Wings or a Giada, but the important thing in this matchup is you're just trying to buy yourself tempo. You know, you're so good at beating them in the long game that Fragment Reality is just a really good tempo play in this matchup. Okay, so even though we did start out flooding out, we're starting to draw some good stuff now. You know, Archmage's Charm should be pretty good. Okay. So they're going to duress us. They're almost certainly going to take the Archmage's Charm, so I think I'm just going to draw 2 here. Okay, we hit some good stuff. We'll see what they take. I mean, Leyline Binding is great because it's an answer to Righteous Valkyrie. Teferi is obviously sick because it's just going to start running away with the late game. Okay, so they leave us with Teferi and Fragment Reality, which kind of makes sense. Oh, wow, okay. So they have Resplendent Angel. Thankfully, that doesn't trigger to make a 5/5 yet. Okay, another Fragment Reality here is interesting. So like I said, even though we can potentially give them a Bishop of Wings or a Giada off the Fragment Reality, it's important just to shut them off. Okay, interesting. Shut them off their bigger cards. So we're definitely use Fragment Reality on Resplendent Angel and the Righteous Valkyrie here. I think I should have done it the other way around because they could potentially. Yeah, I was going to say if we hit Giada, they gain life off the Righteous Valkyrie, but hitting Giada here is actually not too bad because of the Legend rule. They're guaranteed to lose one of these anyway. And then, okay, we hit a Selfless Savior off that, that's fine. So, like I said, even though we do give them cards off the Fragment Reality, it's still not bad because their board has got a lot worse now compared to what it was. You know, even though they do have a Giada, which is a powerful card, we're much better off than we were previously. So I'm going to play the Teferi here. I'm happy to plus because they only have 4 power in play, and we have a Kaleem on top, which we can use to tap down their Giada. And then, you know, we're only one more Kaleem activation after that from getting it on the battlefield, which they're going to find it difficult to attack round. Okay, another Selfless Savior. So again, this is another reason why I'm a big fan of Divine Purge. There are indestructible effects in the format right now, and stuff like Kaleem, Leyline Binding, and Divine Purge just completely gets around that, which is really nice. Because otherwise, if we were relying on Supreme Verdict, we're going to find it very hard to beat Selfless Saviors. So they attack both at Teferi, which makes sense. Okay, Leyline Binding is a nice draw here. So we go up to 4 loyalty, we can at least Leyline Binding the Giada, which means that Teferi is guaranteed to survive another turn. And we hit another Kaleem, which is pretty huge. So I'm gonna, since we're gonna untap 2 lands, I might as well cycle the Spara's Headquarters now so that we get 2 of that mana back. Then I'm going to... I'm just trying to figure out, I think we can afford to play that tapped because it reduces the cost of the Leyline Binding down to 2. And now we can Leyline Binding and Kaleem in the same turn if we needed to here. Okay, they Thoughtseize us, so I think I'm just going to fire off both here. I think we're probably going to Leyline Binding the Giada because that's something that we'd want to deal with long term anyway. And then we can just tap down one of their creatures, it doesn't really matter which one. And now the opponent could strip whatever we draw off the Thoughtseize, but we are going to get the Kaleem back here, which is going to be really efficient at defending Teferi for the next few turns, which is pretty huge. Okay, we draw Supreme Verdict, which they'll take with the Thoughtseize, but that's really not much of an issue because they already have 2 Selfless Saviors in play, plus we wouldn't want a Supreme Verdict with Kaleem in play anyway, so not a huge loss there. I assume they attack Teferi with both. Okay, nice, yeah, we got there. Okay, so we're going second here. And I mean, this hand, 2 tap lands isn't great, but we have so many shocks and triumphs in the deck that if we draw a shock or a triumph in the first 2 draws, and we're going second, so we're more likely to, this hand is actually pretty good because we have, you know, early interaction. Oh wow, we did perfect. But we have so many shock lands and so many triumphs in the deck that I think our odds of drawing one in the first 2 turns were worth speculating on this hand. But now we have, you know, we've got Kaleem and Shock Typhoon to cycle early. We've got Purge as a sweeper. We've got Archmage's Charm. So Blood Creeps into Fabled Passage. Probably imagine the opponent's on either Red Black or Jund midrange. Not 100% sure, but either way, nice that they didn't have a Thoughtseize. And that's another big reason, you know, if you happen to queue up into a Thoughtseize deck and you end up mulliganing a lot, that's really punishing. So, I mean, obviously it paid off, but I think this hand was definitely worth keeping on balance. Okay, so the opponent is on Jund. They play Fable. Interesting. So, question here is whether we want to go for Kaleem or Shark Typhoon. Now, there is an argument to going for Shark Typhoon and then saving Kaleem to tap down this 2 to stop getting them the treasure next turn, but that means that you don't get to hold up counter magic, which seems worse to me. You know, if you did use Kaleem to tap down the 2/2, then you don't have counter magic to shut off what they play during their main phase 2. So I think it's better to use the Kaleem there, and now Shark Typhoon can actually make tokens if we cycle it later now. So see what they do off the Fable. Oh well, they don't do anything. That's a bad sign. Okay, interesting Lelia. So we could counter the Lelia. We could also Leyline binding the Fable and Divine Purge next turn, but I think I prefer using Archmage's Charm on the Lelia here because they could potentially be missing land drops and Lelia could find them a land. And if we wait until next turn to play the Divine Purge, the Fable's going to be flipping anyway. I mean, maybe we should have just cycled Shark Typhoon and then waited to play Purge until the following turn, but then we give them 2 cards off Lelia. So I think it was probably right to counter the Lelia there. Missing our 4th land drop kind of sucks there. You know, we have got 27 lands and we went second, and we drew an extra card off the Kaleem, so I think that's a little bit unfortunate not to hit a land drop, but either way, I don't think it's too bad because if they just play creatures here, we can just Divine Purge. Next turn, sweep the whole board. If they play like a Planeswalker or something, we can just Leyline binding the Planeswalker and then Divine Purge their board next turn. Okay, they play Plunder, interesting. I mean, I think we're definitely discarding the Shark Typhoon. I'm just debating whether we discard a second card as well, because if they get lucky off Plunder, that could be really problematic. I think I'm not going to risk it, you know, I'm not going to discard a second card there. They could hit an Archmage's Charm or a Teferi off that, but I think it's still worth it. I don't think it's worth giving them 2 discards for their 2-mana spell. So they do play Fable, so I think I'm going to Leyline binding the Fable here, and then we can Divine Purge, which will just completely clear their board next turn. And Leyline binding here is nice because it also stops them getting chapter 2 off the Fable, so they don't get to loot. Okay, we did hit another land, which was really important. Now we can just Divine Purge, sweep the whole board, and they didn't get any value off that treasure they created anyway, so that's obviously great for us. And now I feel like we're in a decent spot because if they just play one thing this turn and we draw an untapped land, we can just play Teferi and tuck whatever they play. Okay, they shock in a Steam Vents. Okay, so that's good to know. They didn't hit like a counterspell or anything, and they just play Shieldred. So I mean, I'm definitely going to go Teferi tuck. The fact they shocked in that Steam Vents makes me think they probably must have an Unholy Heat. I can't think of any other reason why they would shock it in otherwise, but it doesn't look like Arena's giving them priority, so yeah, maybe they were thinking of playing Den but went for Shieldred instead. So we'll see if Teferi survives here. They do have Lelia as a hasty threat. Okay, they just Molten Impact. Sure, that's fine, I guess. I mean, obviously we'd prefer Teferi to survive, and they thought Seize. I mean, they should have obviously done that the other way around, because they lost the excess damage off the Molten Impact. If they'd thought Seize first, they would have still kept the damage. Okay, so we draw our 6th land. So I think we want to play the Ralgrim Chime out as a land. We could save it to cycle, and since Tarmogoyf is pretty huge here, I think we have to Divine Purge just to buy us a bit of time. Now, I could see an argument to hardcasting Shark Typhoon if we knew we were going to draw some more. Although, I don't know, we're against Jund, actually. They could very well have Boseiju. They could very well have Assassin's Trophy, so hardcasting is probably a mistake. Oh, yikes. They have a second Tarmogoyf. Okay, that's an issue here, I think. I mean, we do have Kaleem to tap one of them down, and we do have Shark Typhoon that we can either cycle for 1 if they just attack with Tarmogoyfs, or we can cycle for 2 if they also attack with the Den. But them having that second Tarmogoyf is pretty bad for us here. So before combat, we're definitely going to tap down their Tarmogoyf with Kaleem. Now they could fire up Den in response here, but that would mean that they don't get to cast Fable or Shieldred. So there's upsides to either play for us, or I guess downsides depending on what way you look at it. But tap down the Tarmogoyf. We're definitely going to make a 2/2 Shark to trade with the Den here, because we don't want them just attacking with Den every turn, and it will remove one of their lands as well. But yeah, drawing a land there wasn't great. We really need to try and find another Divine Purge if we can here. Taking out Den does mean that if we do find another Divine Purge, that's really good for us. Teferi's fine. Okay, I was going to say we really need something to go alongside it though, because we're... I was going to say, like, if we were 1 point of life higher, we could tuck the Tarmogoyf, but they also have Shieldred that's going to deal us 2. So I think we need to get pretty lucky off Teferi here. We need to hit, I don't know, somehow 2 removal spells, yeah. So we're basically dead here. I think we just have to hope they attack Teferi. You know, we could potentially have 2 removal spells. So there's like an off chance they attack Teferi here, but if they just attack us, we're dead here. I mean, they do have Shieldred as well. Yeah, okay, we're just dead. I'm going to cycle the Sharks just to see what the next card was, but... Okay, looks like they drew an instant as well. Maybe it's a Fatal Push or something? Oh, okay, Riveteer's Charm. I mean, I'm glad I played it out because we got extra information about their deck. So yeah, I mean, we're just dead here. Even if we were 1 life higher, they would just play Shielded and we'd die off the draw anyway. But yeah, them having that second Tarmogoyf there was the big difference maker, I think. So sideboarding here. I mean, I think I could see just running it back here because I don't mind vetoes. Because they're likely going to... If they're not playing Planeswalkers in the main, they're likely to bring it in. I like bringing in Lyra here because we've seen Shieldred just as a way to buff our life total. I mean, looking at their list, it does look like they're more creature-based with Lelia, so I'm also happy to bring in Supreme Verdict, I think. And we did see, you know, Shieldred is obviously 4 mana, so Divine Purge not hitting that is a slight issue. Could also bring in Rest in Peace as a way to shut off Tarmogoyf, because if we have Rest in Peace in play, Tarmogoyf is just going to be a 0-1 for the whole game. And if they have Croxer, it'd shut that off as well, but that would mean cutting Search for Azcanta. That would also mean that Kaleem doesn't come back from the graveyard, so if we see Croxer and it goes to a game 3, which I hope it does obviously, then I could see bringing in Rest in Peace instead, because it shuts off Tarmogoyf, but I think I'm happy to run it back as is. So this hand, obviously, quite a lot of lands, but against the Thoughtseize deck, I don't think I want to mulligan a lot. And to be honest, against the Thoughtseize deck, it's quite nice having a lot of lands because it means we're almost guaranteed to be able to play what we draw off the top. Okay, so they Thoughtseize us here. Be interesting to see what they take. Okay, they take Lyra. I was going to say, if they don't take Lyra, that probably means they have another Thoughtseize, but either way, drawing Archmage's Charm is pretty nice here. Assuming they don't play something really important here, we'll have a guaranteed answer for next turn. And I think since we're flooding out a bit, I'm happy to just cycle this Shark Typhoon now, just to try and draw something else. Okay, Seek New Knowledge is great because now we can get rid of one of these lands for something better. Okay, opponent plays Liliana, we're definitely going to counter that. And now we can we're definitely going to shock in this breeding pool as well because we can go Seek New Knowledge and Kaleem, or I mean I don't see a situation where we're going to double Kaleem. Okay, so they play Lelia. We're definitely going to tap that down before it gets a chance to give them an extra card. Okay, Shark Typhoon's interesting. I mean, we're definitely going to save this Kaleem to tap down their Lelia next turn. We'll Seek New Knowledge here just to see what we draw. Okay, interesting. I think we do want to keep a land, so I think at this point I'm happy to put back a Shark Typhoon. We definitely want to hit a land for next turn. Divine Purge is going to be nice as a permanent answer to Lelia. Ooh, okay, Search for Azcanta is very nice here, because this is the sort of matchup where we really want the Search for Azcanta, where, you know, the opponent's likely to have a lot of discard spells. If it flips, we're just going to have a lot of card advantage. So even though I would quite like to hold up Archmage's Charm for their main phase 2, you know, they could have a Planeswalker. I think I like tapping down the Lelia here just because they could hit a Planeswalker off the attack. They could hit a land off the attack if they're missing land. So I think it's better to just tap it down. If they do have a Planeswalker, then... Oh, okay, they do have a Liliana, but... I mean, that's not the end of the world, I don't think, because we have Leyline Binding, we have Teferi as an answer, plus it gets us closer to flipping the Azcanta now as well. So I think I'm going to pitch this Seek New Knowledge here. And we've already got an Archmage's Charm, so we don't really need that. And then we get to transform the Azcanta here, which is huge. Oh, okay. Teferi's nice. So we can Teferi tuck the Lelia. Or we could... I don't like Teferi tuck the Liliana that much because they can just attack it with the Lelia. I'm going to plus here because... Oh, hitting Leyline Binding is huge. Yeah, I like plussing here because even if they attack with the Lelia, it's only going to be doing 3 damage, so Teferi will survive, and we get to keep up Archmage's Charm here as well, which is pretty huge, so... Plus we saw Molten Impact last game, they could very well have Bone Crusher Giant, so going Teferi tuck Lelia and then having it killed while they have a Liliana in play is potentially problematic. Okay, so they uptick. I think we're just going to discard the Divine Purge here because Leyline Binding can now act as an answer for Lelia. Oh, they discard a second Lelia, okay. Oh wow, they have Shifting Ceratops, okay. Well, I'm very glad that we've got this Leyline Binding now. They give it haste, okay, so we can just Leyline Binding the Ceratops here, which we have to do because, I mean, we don't really have many other great answers for it. And at least this way it means that they are guaranteed to whiff off the Leyline here. Okay, yeah, they hit Tarmogoyf if they can't play. Okay, so we're going to plus off the Teferi here. Oh, okay, Wandering Emperor is a nice draw. So now we can Wandering Emperor during our turn to exile the Leyline, and then we can still untap off Teferi with counter magic. And even though Liliana is getting closer to the ultimate, we're going to be able to get Kaleem back from the graveyard, which we can then use to just attack the Liliana. Now, we do need to be careful how we sequence this because... Oh, okay, they thought sees us. I was going to say they can minus the Liliana to force us to sack the Kaleem. But, I mean, either way, that's going to get us... You know, it takes them further away from the ultimate, so... I think I'm just going to let them Thoughtseize here because I think there's a pretty high chance they take the Archmage's Charm. And then if they plus off the Liliana here, we can then just Kaleem into play and into the speed, and then they don't have the option to minus the Liliana at that point. Ha, okay. So the Riveteer's Charm... Now this is a tough decision. We could let Teferi die here, or we could get Kaleem into play, sack the Kaleem, and then just use Teferi to minus on the Liliana. And then, although, this is a tough play because I think I like getting Kaleem into play and sacking that, because even if we do get Kaleem into play, it doesn't cleanly kill the Liliana. Even if we brick off our draw step here, we can cleanly kill the Liliana with Teferi here. Now we do lose the Kaleem, but we're only one more Kaleem cycle away from getting another one back at this point. And there's always a chance that we could draw a Leyline Binding or something off the top, so... Okay. So we have to deal with Liliana here either way. I think I'm going to lead on the Escanter activation just to see what we hit. Oh, we hit another Teferi, okay. So now we can just tuck the Liliana, and that will permanently deal with... Well, not permanently, it'll put a 3 deep in their deck, but... Now we're in a spot where, you know, we're guaranteed to get Kaleem back next turn, and we have another Teferi now as well. So I like the play that we made, because if we didn't already have Kaleems in the graveyard, then I think it becomes a lot riskier, because we're throwing away a Teferi to kill Liliana, where we could have, you know, put Liliana down to 1 loyalty and kept a Kaleem in play, but now we're going to get another Kaleem in play anyway, so... So yeah, the opponent will need something pretty good to get back from this spot, I think. So we'll just cycle the Kaleem again here. Yeah, okay, nice, we got there. So, sideboard-wise, I mean, didn't really see anything too different there that would make me want to change sideboarding. Again, if I saw Croxer, I think I'd probably want Rest in Peace, but as things stand, Search for Escanter was actually pretty huge there, at both ramping us and digging for more cards, so I like just running it back here, see how we do on the draw here. I think this hand's fine, you know, typically against Thoughtseize decks, if your hand is reasonable, you don't want a mulligan, so... Looks like the opponent has Thoughtseize here, yep, okay. So, interesting to see what they take. I assume it'll be Leyline Binding or Seek New Knowledge. I don't think taking Kaleem makes much sense. Yeah, okay, they take Seek New Knowledge, it makes sense. So, since we drew another land, I think I'm going to try and hold on to this Triumph to cycle. See what the opponent does here. Okay, Fable Passage. And another Thoughtseize, so losing the Leyline Binding here, I assume. Okay, Archmage's Charm's a nice draw. And we can Kaleem next turn as well, so we've got stuff to do this turn and next turn. And obviously you want to get the Kaleem train going as early as you can, because getting, you know, if you draw multiple Kaleems, getting an early one into play is so strong against decks that are trying to beat you by attacking with creatures. Okay, so they have Leyline. Obviously we're going to tap that down with Kaleem. Like, they're not going to be able to cast what they hit off it, but we don't want them to start getting +1/+1 counters. Plus we would want to use the Kaleem there anyway, so... So we'll pass here. Can hold up Archmage's Charm for whatever they decide to cast. Now, we don't have an answer for Leyline, which could be an issue, but we do have a lot of, with Leyline Binding, Wandering Emperor, Teferi, we have a lot of ways to deal with whatever to deal with the Leyline. So here, snapping off Archmage's Charm on the Fable, obviously. We definitely want to make use of our mana, and we have a second Archmage's Charm. So here, I think we're happy to play the Hallowed Fountain tapped. If they play something we want to counter, we can just Archmage's Charm. If they don't, we can just cycle the Triome here. They attack with the Leyline. Oh wow, okay. Just gotta hope they don't have a second green here. Because we obviously can't counter the Ceratops, so the only ways we'd have of dealing with that is Leyline Binding, Wandering Emperor, or we did bring in Supreme Verdict. We do have a couple copies of Supreme Verdict, so... Oh wow, okay, they don't have a second green. That is huge for us. So I'm going to Seek New Knowledge here. Oh, okay, nice. So, hit a Wandering Emperor, which is pretty huge. I think I'm happy to put back a Seek New Knowledge here, because I'm going to discard this Triome, I think... Or we could discard the Deserted Beach. Just depends whether we think we're going to play Wandering Emperor next turn or not. I think I'm happy to put Seek New Knowledge back, and we're going to discard a land here. Definitely not going to discard an additional card. Again, they could get lucky with what we give them there. It is kind of risky, but I don't think it's worth... I don't think it's worth discarding when we're solo on resources anyway. Now, since we ended up casting the Wandering Emperor, maybe it was better there to keep the Ralgrin Triome, but I don't think it really matters. We already have blue-red and blue-white dual lands, so it doesn't affect Leyline Binding in any way. Okay, so they have another Leyline. Attack down the Wandering Emperor. I mean, that takes damage away from us, which is nice.
I'm never done.
Okay, they hit a Fable they can't hit, which is obviously great for us. Play Stomping Ground tapped. So definitely want to use this Colleen to tap down the Leyline here. Would be a bit annoying if they attack with the Den, because we don't have great ways to stop that. We quite want them to cast something main phase 2 here, so that we have something good for our Archmage's Charm. And now we are one Kaleem activation away from getting the creature back, which will be really good at stonewalling what they're trying to do. Okay, so they do play Liliana, definitely going to Archmage's Charm that. Oh, perfect. Okay, that's really good. Now we drew a Kaleem, so now we can get Kaleem back from the graveyard straight away here, which is huge. And we can still hold up Archmage's Charm for whatever they cast main phase 2. Now again, they could fire up Den in response here, but we're getting Kaleem into play, which is going to stop them attacking with it next turn anyway, so... So we get Kaleem into play here. Okay, the Riveteer's Charm, we're definitely going to counter that. Having Kaleem stick about is going to be huge. It could potentially just stonewall them from attacking with Leyline. And I don't think outside of Riveteer's Charm they're going to have... Oh, you're kidding me. So they did get lucky off the Undercity Plunder. That kind of sucks. Okay, we hit Divine Purge though. So that's good. I think I'm going to Purge here. And then... I think I'm happy to play the Spara's Headquarters here because it allows us to make a 4/4 Shark next turn, which is going to be able to ambush Leyline in combat if they play it, and also eat Den of the Bugbear. Okay, another Purge. I think I just want to use the Shark Typhoon here. If we hadn't played that land and we'd saved it to cycle, we would have lost the Shark token in combat to the Leyline here, but now we can make a 4/4. See what they exile first, and now we can just make a 4/4 Shark. And unless they have like a Fatal Push or an Unholy Heat, I guess they can still have Bone Crusher Giant in the deck, but they're not going to have that much stuff to stop that. And we drew Teferi here, which is huge. So we don't have, we've only got one Kaleem in the graveyard, but... Oh, they do have Molten Impact. Thankfully it was Sorcery Speed interaction though, which is huge. Now the one annoying thing about Kaleem is that it can't be used to tap down lands. Oh wow, they have Spyglass. Okay, so that's pretty annoying because they can shut off Teferi here. I'm surprised it's not Pithing Needle. Like, that's generally the better card. And they have Goyf, okay. I mean, Divine Purge does get rid of the Spyglass, but only for a turn. But I think since they know we have Teferi in hand, they're pretty incentivized to play the Spyglass first here. And they only have 7 mana, so they would have to top deck a land to be able to play both cards here. Plus we get to cycle the Kaleem, you know, then as we can see, you know, there's another Kaleem lurking near the top of our deck, so once we get another Kaleem cycle, we can get another Kaleem in play here. Oh, they did hit another land, which kind of sucks, because now they can play Goyf and Spyglass in the same turn here. So they've shut off Teferi again. I think even though we would like to save Kaleem to tap down the Tarmogoyf, I think we've got another Kaleem 2 cards deep anyway, so we get to do that next turn regardless. But I think we're still in a reasonable spot here. You know, we get to keep tapping down the Tarmogoyf. Oh, and there's a Wandering Emperor as well, okay. So I think... Interesting spot here, because we could flash in the Wandering Emperor now to exile the Tarmogoyf, or we could tap down the Tarmogoyf and save the Wandering Emperor to exile Den of the Bugbear if they don't play anything else. So I think I'm going to pass here. I think they're more incentivized. Oh wow, okay, they have a Leyline. So I think I probably want to tap down the Leyline here to stop them getting an extra card. Now they might fire up the Den in response. Yeah, okay, they do. But we do get back the Kaleem here, and we can turn Kaleem into a 6 power creature off the Wandering Emperor here. So we're going to exile the Tarmogoyf, and then we can +1 on the Wandering Emperor to turn... oh no. Oh, that was a huge misplay by me, whoops. So I should have waited for them to make the 1/1 token first, because now they can attack Wandering Emperor with the 1/1. Okay, yeah, that was a pretty big punt on my part, because I was saying that we could +1 the Wandering Emperor to turn Kaleem into a 6/6, which would give the opponent a 2-turn clock. Whereas now, I think we have to keep Kaleem back on defense. So that was a really big mistake on my part. That was... Yeah, I should have let them make the 1/1 first, and then they'd be dead in 2 turns. And they would have to deal 14 damage or kill Kaleem this turn. So yeah, that was just half a misclick, half a misplay on my part. So we just got to hope they don't hit anything good off the Leyline. Okay, the fact they're attacking with the Den... I mean, we're definitely going to tap down the Leyline here. And hopefully that'll put them off attacking with the Den. Because if they do, they're only going to get in for 2 points of damage, and we get to kill their Den in combat. So I'm going to cycle Kaleem again here, just to make the most of our mana. And then I don't mind attacking, because we could make another Kaleem on defense if we wanted to, but I'm kind of tilted that... Oh wow, okay. I was going to say, I'm kind of tilted that we didn't get to activate the Wandering Emperor there, because that would have probably meant that we're guaranteed to win this turn, but since we drew Lyra, I'm pretty sure that's just going to be good enough now. They'd need to hit 2 removal spells to get them out of this, and even then we have Divine Purge now as well, so... Even though we should have won last turn because I misplayed with the Wandering Emperor, we should still end up winning here. I mean, I assume they attack with Leyline just to see what they hit. Wow, they're firing up Den. I mean, that seems like a misplay, because if they hit Riveteer's Charm here, they're not going to be able to cast it. I mean, either way, we're just going to block the Leyline here. And yeah, okay, nice, we got there. Okay, so we're going first here. And yeah, this hand looks great. You know, we've got early interaction. If we're up against a deck where we don't need the interaction, we can put it back with Seek New Knowledge. We've got 4 lands, so we know we're going to be hitting land drops. If we do end up flooding out, we can use Seek New Knowledge to put lands back. So Yeah, I like this hand, especially on the play. So see what the opponent's on here. Okay, they're on humans, interesting. So that can be a tough matchup, but I actually think with this particular build, you have a lot of ways to combat their best starts. You know, Kaleem and Shark Typhoon are particularly good against Esper Sentinel and Thalia, which is like a very nice upgrade over previous builds. Okay, they play Catilda here. Okay, they attack, so don't have any other 1-mana plays off the Catilda mana. Seek New Knowledge here, definitely going to put back a veto. You know, I don't mind keeping 1 for Collected Company, but I think keeping 2 is a bit much. I like going for Divine Purge here because I don't really want to let them untap with the extra mana off Catilda. You know, they could potentially go for Collected Company on turn 3, which is scary. And it also takes out the clue from Thraben Inspector, which is nice. Okay, they go for Ranger Captain. Let's see what they get. I assume Esper Sentinel. Yeah, okay, which is a little bit annoying because, I mean, we'll see what we draw here, but I think we're very interested in using Wandering Emperor to kill the Ranger Captain here, which would mean if they did play the Esper Sentinel that we'd have to flash it in before combat. I mean, again, it doesn't really make a huge difference though, and they could, you know, in a way, if they play Sentinel, it's not bad because it means they don't have Collected Company. Okay, they do play the Sentinel, so we'll flash in the Wandering Emperor now, which kind of, you know, it gives away what we've got, and it means that they know we don't have counter spells for whatever else they play this turn, but we can still use it to kill the Ranger Captain here, unless they don't attack with it. I assume they do, though. Yeah, they do. So we'll minus to exile the Ranger Captain. I assume they sack in response to deny us the life gain here. Yeah, okay. So we miss out on the life gain, but that's not too much of an issue. I think I'm going to minus to make a 2-2 here. Just, you know, we could tap down the Catilda and hope that the Wandering Emperor survives, but if they have a Thalia's Lieutenant, that would turn Sentinel into a 2-2 and kill it anyway, so I think it's better to just play it safe. We could have set a stop during the upkeep to tap down the Catilda there, but with the opponent not having that many resources here, I don't mind waiting. Okay, they pass, so they obviously have Collected Company here. So I'm going to use Kaleem now. I mean, honestly, tapping down Catilda doesn't really do that much either because it affects all of their humans. We're only denying them 1 mana if we'd done it during the upkeep. So since we know they have Collected Company, I'm going to go for Kaleem now just to make use of our mana. And we want to get the Kaleem train started because getting a 5/6 into play against humans is huge. But I'm not going to go for Seek New Knowledge because they could Collected Company in response. And I want to ensure that I have Dovin's veto up the whole time, because if we play Seek New Knowledge there and they company in response, we're kind of screwed. I think we might want to save this Spyro's Headquarters to cycle. I'm going to shock in the Steam Vents here because I want to be able to veto, pay for the... Yeah, so they do have Collected Company, obviously. I want to be able to veto here, pay for the Sentinel tax, and still Shark Typhoon for 1. Or potentially cycle the Spyro's Headquarters here if they don't play anything that we want to block in combat. Okay, they just play the Thraben Inspector. That's fine. Do they have another Collected Company here? That would be rough. I mean, I'm going to cycle the Shark Typhoon here and try and double block this General's Enforcer because we do need to be able to kill this because it's, you know, it's giving their Catilda indestructible. It will give like Thalia indestructible if they have that as well. Okay, so we do get to kill the General's Enforcer, which is nice. So here, I would quite like to main phase this Seek New Knowledge, but we would have to pay the Sentinel tax, which is a little bit annoying. Okay, so we pay that. Perfect. I was going to say we're looking for Divine Purge here, so that's great. I think we're going to put back one of these Triomes here. We've already got Ralgrin Triome in play, so I think that's probably the one we're looking to put back. And... I think I'm going to Divine Purge now because there is a chance they have company, but I don't think we can really afford to play around that. Oh, they don't? Okay. So that's huge for us. We just get to sweep the board here, and then we've got Teferi next turn as well. So unless they have 2 creatures, which they very well could, we might just be able to go Teferi, tuck something, and then start untapping with it. Okay, they've got double Hopeful Initiate and a Ranger Captain. Okay. So, got to hope to draw something to protect Teferi here. Okay, they get Giant Killer, which is interesting. Oh, Leyline Binding. Okay, perfect. So now we can go Teferi and plus. And then we can just Leyline Binding the Ranger Captain before attacks so the Hopeful Initiates don't get any bigger. Ooh, okay, and an Archmage's Charm as well. So, actually, thinking about it, I probably should have played the Sparrow's Headquarters. I was going to save the Sparrow's Headquarters to cycle, but if I had played the Sparrow's Headquarters, Leyline Binding would cost 1, and then we would be able to cast Archmage's Charm and Leyline Binding in the same turn, but since they played Esper Sentinel, that probably isn't going to make a difference now anyway, so the nice thing here is these Hopeful Initiates are now going to stay 1/1s. They don't get any benefit off the training, which means that Thalia only goes down to 3 loyalty, which is pretty nice. Okay, they have another Catilda. And we have Kaleem, so I think we should be able to get Kaleem back here. They do have Giant Killer, but we have Archmage's Charm to stop the Giant Killer here. So, I mean, since we're untapping off the Teferi anyway, I don't mind just hard casting the Kaleem here so that we have it on defense, because if we cycle the Kaleem to get it back, it comes into play tapped. Whereas this way, it just makes their attacks really bad. So they try and Giant Killer, we'll let them pay the ward tax here, and then we can Archmage's Charm. And now since we have Kaleem in play untapped, we can, they basically have pretty bad attacks here. If they do attack Teferi with everything, we can just we can just block the Catilda or the Esper Sentinel here. Okay, so it doesn't look like they're going to attack here, which is great for us. Okay, Search for Azcanta is not a bad one, because that's going to flip almost immediately. Okay, another Kaleem's pretty nice as well, because now we can tap down one of their creatures to stop them attacking. So we'll pay the Sentinel tax, obviously. We don't want to give them free cards at this point. Going to keep the Kaleem back on blocking duties here. And they could fire up... Oh wow, okay. They go for Catilda's ability, which makes sense. But we can still protect the Teferi here. So I'm going to tap down one of their creatures so that Teferi doesn't die. This might just completely disincentivize them from attacking altogether, which would be ideal. Ooh, okay, and we draw Wandering Emperor as well. I mean, that's pretty nice. That would give them another card if we flashed it in here, though, because their Sentinel now has 2 power. But I still think it's worth it. So they do get a card here, but this will just keep Teferi at higher loyalty. Okay, nice. Yeah, we got there. So, humans. I mean, this is definitely a matchup where we want to bring in Lyra, Supreme Verdict, and Fragment Reality, and same as before, we're just going to cut Search for Azcanta, Davin's Veto, and I mean, Seek New Knowledge is nice at finding our cards, and Archmage's Charm isn't that great in this specific matchup, but I think Archmage's Charm is probably more useful than Seek New Knowledge, because we can obviously counter stuff if we do get ahead on tempo to shut the game out. And we can also steal their 1-drops like Esper Sentinel with it, whereas Seek New Knowledge, is basically just a way to spin your wheels, and against an aggro deck, especially like this, you want all of your cards to impact the board if you can. So I like sideboarding like that. I think in general that's how I'd sideboard, cut Azcanta, cut Veto, cut Seek New Knowledge, bring in Fragment Reality's removal, Lyra as a good way to stonewall the opponent and a way to cheat, Fragment Reality plus Leyline Binding cheats Lyra into play, and then bring in Supreme Verdict as well as just extra sweepers. Okay, so I think I'm going to lead on a Triome here. Fragment Reality is great against their 1-drops, so we would love to just be able to fire this off against that Hopeful Initiate. Okay, General's Enforcer, that's fine. I think we're probably incentivized to play this other Triome here, because then we can Fragment Reality, the Hopeful Initiate, and then have 3 mana untapped for Archmage's Charm the following turn. Okay, they Dauntless Bodyguard. Let's see what they protect here. Protecting the Enforcer, makes sense. And then Thalia. Okay, so we're definitely going to fire off the Fragment Reality on the Hopeful Initiate now. And then it's a bit annoying, we might have to use Fragment Reality on Thalia. Oh, okay, Leyline Binding is a good draw. I was going to say Fragment Reality on Thalia isn't great because we could give them an Esper Sentinel, which is better than a Thalia, but it's not by much. So I think we're probably going to Leyline Binding here. Now they could have another Thalia in hand, but I don't think it's worth risking just taking 2 extra damage on the off chance they do have another one. You know, we're all about just trying to survive here. Okay, another Hopefulness ship. Well, we can kill that with the Fragment Reality. So we'll play a Deserted Beach here, and I mean, interesting what we could do here, because we could steal Hopeful Initiate and kill the Dauntless Bodyguard, or we could tap down their stuff here. I think I like tapping down their stuff because it then gets us closer to getting Kaleem into play. You know, since we have 2 Kaleems drawn naturally, all we need is 1 more, and then we can get a 5/6 into play, which is going to stonewall a lot of their attacks. So we get to tap down both the Bodyguard and the Enforcer, which will mean the Hopeful Initiate doesn't get any bonus off the training. Okay, so they probably have Collected Company here, which is a bit rough. Thankfully we have Archmage's Charm, and they don't have a Sentinel that we have to pay the tax for or anything. So we'll counter the Company here. And then we've still got Fragment Reality to take out the Bodyguard or the Hopeful Initiate. Okay, Inquisitor Captain's pretty good for them. I mean, I think we'll just see what they hit off the Captain first. I'm thinking about whether there's any benefit to Fragment Reality. Now, if they hit a Thalia, we can still Fragment Reality. If they hit a Esper Sentinel, we can still Fragment Reality. Okay. So they hit Thalia's Lieutenant. I think we're just going to Fragment Reality the Hopeful Initiate now. But yeah, that was a pretty big turn for the opponent. We might just be too slow here. So we can make a Shark and Archmage's Charm the Bodyguard. I mean, that's probably not good enough, but that's our best shot. I don't think playing Teferi does anything here. You know, we could Teferi plus, but they could just very well attack us then. So I'm going to Archmage's Charm the Bodyguard. They presumably sack in response here. Yep. And then we can just make a Shark to block the Inquisitor Captain here, and then we survive at 2. And then just hope to draw a sweeper, I guess. So Supreme Verdict would do it here. You know, Divine Purge doesn't take out the... So that's a bit unfortunate. I mean, we can Teferi plus, and then tap down something with Kaleem, and hope to draw another way to kill one of their creatures. You know, oh, we've got another Kaleem on top. Okay, nice. I completely forgot about that. So we can tap down the Captain, tap down the Enforcer, and just hope that they don't draw another human. Oh no, wait, they've got Enforcer's ability. Okay, so now we've lost no matter what, I think. Because we've only got 4 mana here, we can tap down 2 of their creatures, but they've got Lieutenant and the 1/1 as well. So yeah, I mean, I'm going to play it out just to see what the next card was, but definitely not going to be winning this game, unfortunately. Yeah, and they can use the Enforcer to stop us getting back Kaleem as a creature as well, which is pretty good from their point of view. Okay, so unfortunately didn't get there that time, but we were on the, we were on the draw, and it was fairly close for a lot of that game anyway. So here, I don't think we really want to make any changes. I think I was pretty happy with how we sideboarded there. I think we'll definitely have a better chance going first now. But yeah, humans, I mean, in general, I think it's a close matchup for sure, but I think this particular build has a lot better tools at dealing with them because, like I said, Kaleem not being taxed by Sentinel and Thalia has been so huge whenever I've faced this matchup. Okay, so we'll go first here. Can't keep a 1-lander. This looks decent though, we've got Fragment Reality and Archmage's Charm. Definitely need to put back one of these Teferis. So we'll lead on the Triome here. And even if the opponent has Sentinel on 1, we'll have Fragment Reality as a way to kill it. Okay, they lead on Hopeful Initiate. And we draw a Leyline Binding, which we can already reduce down to 2 mana because of the breeding pool here, which is nice. Okay, they got Bodyguard. I mean, I'm happy to just Fragment Reality the Hopeful Initiate now. Okay, they play Temple Garden tapped. I think I'm just going to shock in the breeding pool here, and then we have the option to either Archmage's Charm or Leyline Binding here, which is nice. Okay, Lieutenant. I think I'm just going to snap off the Archmage's Charm here. We want to try and get to a point where we can Teferi and defend it, and so keeping their creatures out of play is really important. Wow, they missed their land drop. Okay, that's really big for us. So we do Divine Purge. Unfortunately, we don't have our second white mana yet, which is a bit of an issue, but if we can use Leyline Binding on Bodyguard or a creature they play, then next turn we could potentially, if we draw an untapped land, we can Teferi and tuck their other creature that's left. Okay, so interesting which creature we want a binding here. I think we'll probably just go for the Bodyguard. You know, Lieutenant is more of a problem long term, but they are going to, you know, they're stuck on lands, and we already have Teferi as a way to tuck something potentially. So we could go to Fairy Plus here, but I think that's probably a bit of a risk, because if they have another Lieutenant they can just kill Teferi, whereas since they're stuck on lands, I'm happy to just go for Divine Purge and clear the board so that we can go to Teferi next turn. They only play one creature here, which is huge, so now we can go to Teferi and tuck, and we can be pretty confident that it will survive because Humans doesn't really have any haste creatures, they don't have any burn spells, so, you know, assuming they're not playing something weird like I don't know, like black mana into a Blood Chief's Thirst or something weird, Teferi should survive here. Okay, they got Kudro. But we've got Divine Purge as an answer for that. And we also have the Hall of Storm Giants up now as well. We have 6 mana to activate that. Oh, okay, and Wandering Emperor, nice. So I don't even think we need to fire off the Divine Purge here. I mean, we could flash in Wandering Emperor now, but that seems like a massive waste when we could potentially use it to kill the Kudro here. So I think we'll... And since we have Hall of Storm Giants here, there's a chance they don't attack as well. Okay, they do attack, makes sense. I mean, they have to apply some sort of pressure here. We'll just flash in the Emperor here, exile the Kudro, and then we can either plus the Wandering Emperor, depending on what else they play, or just minus. I mean, we'll see what they play. Oh, well, they main phase a Company. I mean, we've got Divine Purge in hand, so we're completely fine with that. Oh, no, they hit Freebooter. Okay, we're not completely fine with that then. I was going to say, if they hit anything other than a Freebooter there, we can just Divine Purge their whole board, but now they can take the Purge with the Freebooter here, which is a bit annoying, so we'll lead on plussing with Teferi to see what we hit.
Keep up the pace.
Okay, another land isn't great. And I think we just have to minus to make a 2-2 here, because they have a 1-2. You know, we still have the Hall of Storm Giants we can animate to block, but they can just attack. Now, I don't want to give away that we don't have anything, so I'm going to set stops during my main phase 2 and end step, so it doesn't just give away that we don't have anything instant speed. And then I'm going to set stops during the opponent's turn here as well. I mean, actually no, that's not really necessary because we can animate the Hall of Storm Giants, so we have priority anyway, but had we not had priority, I think it's important to do that sort of thing. Okay, so they play Sentinel into Thalia's Lieutenant, which is a bit rough. I mean, we'll see if they attack with the Ranger Captain. Ah, okay, they nearly did. I mean, they're obviously aware of the Hall of Storm Giants. Oh, okay, that was a sick draw. That was exactly what we wanted to see. So now we can flash in the Wandering Emperor to kill the Freebooter. I'm just trying to calculate if we have enough mana to pay the Sentinel tax. So 1, 2, 3, 4 plus. Yeah, we do. So we can flash in the Wandering Emperor here, pay the Sentinel tax, exile the Freebooter, and play Divine Purge in the same turn. Now they could sack the Ranger Captain in response to the Emperor here, which could be an issue. Doesn't look like they do though. Okay, sweet. So now we've cleared the board and we've got Teferi and Emperor in play. Again, I'm going to set stops during the opponent's turn as to not give away that we don't have anything. Okay, they play Thraben Inspector. I mean, us having Hall of Storm Giants is huge here, just preventing them from getting in on the ground. Okay, they have another Inquisitor Captain. I was kind of hoping that since we have a bunch of their cards in exile, they might whiff on the Inquisitor Captain. And they hit a Thalia. Okay, that's not bad, but thankfully they have all ground creatures, so... Oh, and Shark Typhoon is huge here. Okay, that's nice. So, I think we want to make a 2-2 off the Wandering Emperor here. Play a land, and then I'm just going to pass. You know, they might not attack because of the Hall of Storm Giants anyway, but we can just make a really big shark now. Ha, okay, Kudro, so... Hopefully they attack it. I mean, the annoying thing about Kudro is that they can now kill the shark token off the Kudro's ability. Maybe they went... Okay, yeah, they didn't attack because they would have had to pay 2 for the Kudro ability and pay the ward on Hall of Storm Giants as well if they wanted to attack. So now we get to make a huge shark here. And even though they're on a 2-turn clock with attacking, they can... Ooh, okay. I mean, Leyline Binding is nice. So I think I'm going to attack here with the 8-8, because they can kill it with the Kudro anyway. Now, there is an argument to killing the Kudro before they untap here. But... they have to sacrifice 2 creatures to stop us winning anyway. So, which would mean they have fewer attackers. Although, actually, wait, I guess they could attack first, right? And then kill the shark after combat. So, yeah, I think I probably should have Leyline Binding the Kudro before they untap there. That was a misplay on my part. Yeah, okay, so... I mean, we'll fire up Hall of Storm Giants here. And then... Wow, they company. Okay. So I think we'll wait to see what they hit off the company before they binding. They already have a Thalia in play, so that's not going to tax anything else. Okay, they hit an Adeline. Exiling Shark Typhoon. So we definitely want to Leyline Binding the Kudro here to reduce the power of everything. But I'm just thinking whether we block first and then binding to pay for the Sentinel tax. Or whether we binding... Yeah, I think we block like this. And then we... binding now. Pay the Sentinel tax here. And then... exile the Kudro. Yeah, I mean... they presumably now sack the creatures like Thalia that's going to die in combat to kill the 8-8. So yeah, I definitely should have exiled the Kudro before they untapped, because then they don't have any way to kill the 8-8 and they're just dead on board. So that was a definite misplay on my part, but I'm hoping we can still win from this point. Oh wow, okay, Wandering Emperor's a nice draw here. So, do we want to flash in the Wandering Emperor now? Probably not. I think since I'm going to untap off the Teferi, I'm going to cycle the Raffine's Towers to see what we draw first. And now I'll untap 2 lands. And now we have... Okay, they have Ranger Captain. Now we have both Hall of Storm Giants and the Wandering Emperor here. So we should be able to kill the Adeline. Oh no, wait, so that's gonna... So when they attack, they'll make a 1-1 off the Adeline. It'll make it 7 power. So we can... So we can either ignore the Adeline, take 6, and block something else with the Hall of Storm Giants. Or, I mean, I think we'll wait to see what they attack with the 1-1 first here. But we could Hall of Storm Giants and then use Wandering Emperor to exile another one of their creatures so that Adeline goes down to 6 power, and then we can just block Adeline in combat here. Or we could just potentially ignore the Adeline. I'm just trying to think. Oh, wait. Maybe we should block first to pay the Sentinel tax. I should have thought this through before I did anything, to be honest. I mean, this is still fine. We gave them an extra card, but we can exile the Sentinel and eat the Adeline in combat, or we can eat another creature in combat, take the damage from Adeline, and exile something else. Or we can just make a 2/2, block the Esper Sentinel, block the Inquisitor Captain, and since we're at 18, I think we can just afford to take the 7 damage. It's not that much of an issue. You know, we could have let Teferi die there, since we have another one in hand, but I think this is still a fine exchange for us overall. Yeah, sorry if I didn't articulate that properly. There was just a lot to think about that turn. So I still think we're in a pretty decent spot here. We can make another token off the Wandering Emperor. We get to draw off the Teferi as well here.
Keep up the pace.
But yeah, I mean, I kind of tilted about that misplay. We would have won by now had we exiled the Kudro before they untapped. So I think I want to exile the Ranger Captain here with the Wandering Emperor. We could have made another 2/2, but them being able to sack the Wandering Emperor could be an issue on later turns, so I want to kill that now. And I'd rather kill a bigger creature than just make a 2/2. Oh, okay, another Shark Typhoon. So this should hopefully be good enough to close the game out now, because we can make a... what would it be? A huge 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9... yeah, just make it a bigger than 8 power Shark to hopefully win the game next turn. Assuming they don't have another way to kill it. So even though we should have won this game a few turns ago by killing the Kudro, this should still get the job done. Okay, so they're tapped out here. We should just make a shark token to win. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, sweet. So we just make a 10/10 shark here, and then just attack for lethal next turn. Again, I guess we should have waited for them to pick where the 1/1 goes, but it shouldn't end up mattering. Yeah, okay, nice. Got there in the end. Okay, so we're going first here, and yeah, I think we can keep this going first. You know, we can use Seek New Knowledge on turn 2 to put back one of these lands and hopefully dig for some other stuff. We've still got Shark Typhoon as a way to cycle too, so I think on the play this is a decent keep. Opponent's obviously thinking their mulligan decision 3, but yeah, overall I think in a 27 land deck I've been really impressed with Seek New Knowledge in general, just as a way to guarantee that you draw gas. Okay, so opponent leads on Mountain here, so I think I'm going to try and avoid shocking in lands if I can avoid it, in case the opponent's playing Burn or Mono Red Aggro. Oh wow, which it looks like they are, okay. So Burning Tree, another Burning Tree. I mean, I'm very glad I've got Divine Purge in hand right now. Okay, and Bone Crusher, sure. So, we're definitely going for Seek New Knowledge here, see what we hit. Oh, and another Divine Purge. Okay, I think I'm just going to put back that Seek New Knowledge. We definitely want lands 3 and 4. Now we've seen Wandering Emperor. And I think we're just going to go for Divine Purge here. You know, it's important to keep them off Embercleave, or we don't have a counter spell for that. And in general, we just want to slow them down as much as possible. So we'll Purge here. And then we potentially got Wandering Emperor if they play Bone Crusher Giant. You know, the other... oh, they got Annex, okay. But yeah, the other big downside of not going for Divine Purge there is it makes Wandering Emperor the following turn a lot weaker of a play. Oh wow, okay, Torbran. Okay, so there is definitely an argument to potentially going, you know, saving Divine Purge for Anax and using Emperor to kill Torbran, but we'd be taking, what, 7 damage here? I think we just need to exile the Anax and try and find an answer to the Torbran. Okay, nice. I mean, that's pretty reasonable. We've now got Kaleem as a way to tap down the Torbran. I think it might be really greedy doing this, but since we have an answer for the Torbran, I'm happy plussing the Emperor I mean, they could have a Bonecrusher Giant to kill the Emperor now. We do have a veto to stop that though, so I think we're happy just going Kaleem here. And, you know, they've already proceeded to combat, so we know they don't have a hasty threat now. Oh, okay, we drew Leyline Binding. That's nice. Now we have an answer to the Torbran. So we'll see what else they play here. Chainwhirler. Okay, so that's going to deal 2 damage to the Emperor. So I think we have to Leyline Binding the Torbran now so that the Emperor survives. Okay. And now I think we just have to go for the -1. I mean, maybe it was greedy to not just go for the -1 last turn anyway. I think since we have a lot of stuff in hand, I'm happy to play this as a land, and then I'm just going to pass here. You know, we could Divine Purge, but they have a lot of stuff in exile to still play, so I think I kind of just want to wait for them to play more stuff to get more value off the Divine Purge. Okay, so they just attack. We've got another Burning Tree. See what else they play here. And another Burning Tree. See if they've got... Oh, they could also play the Bonecrusher Giant here as well, right? Oh, and Ferocodon, okay. So I think I'm going to seek New Knowledge first here just to see what we hit. Okay, I'm going to put the veto back. And... Oh, wait. Okay, yeah, that was a misplay. I should have cycled the Shark Typhoon before Ferocodon comes into play, because now we'll take a damage off the Ferocodon trigger, yeah. So I should have cycled the Shark Typhoon first there, but... Either way, definitely just going to go for Divine Purge here. And now with Teferis in hand, we're in a pretty good spot because we can potentially Leyline Binding if they play a big threat, and then we can just Teferi and uptick it, hopefully. You know, if they manage to put 2 creatures into play, we can Binding one and Teferi tuck the other. Okay, so they lead on a Burning Tree. I guess they can also play Bonecrusher here. Yeah, okay. So we definitely want to go for the Leyline Binding now, take out the Bonecrusher Giant. And then, I mean, we'll see what we draw here, but I think we're probably incentivized just to go to Fairy and Tuck, or we could plus here, you know, because they do have a lot of haste creatures and they do potentially have burn spells as well. And then this allows us to untap with counter spells, and they're pretty incentivized to have to attack the Teferi with Burning Tree anyway, so we get to draw more cards this way. I could see going to Fairy Tuck though, but I quite like it this way, because even if they don't play anything we want to counter, we can just draw to hopefully get towards a sweeper. Okay, they do play the Burning Tree. I'm just going to counter that, and that will hopefully stop them playing anything else. Oh, wow, they had a Robber. Okay. I mean, we could have waited, but then that enables them to play more. Oh, wow, and they hit a Kaleem as well. That's pretty rough. Oh, okay, Wandering Emperor's not bad, though. I was going to say, like, I think countering the Burning Tree is correct there, because they'd have to have a 2-mana haster off the top to punish us there, and even then the punishment isn't that bad. You know, Teferi's still alive here. We get to exile the Robber of the Rich here. I'm going to set stops during the opponent's turn and during the end of mine, so it doesn't give away that we don't have anything here. Okay, so they Chain Whirler, which will kill the Wandering Emperor, and then they can just kill the Teferi here. But we have 2 more in hand, so it's not the end of the world. So I think we could plus here and hope to draw a removal spell. I think that's what we'll probably go for. Oh, okay, that also works. Now we can make a Shark token as a way to block. So I'm going to shock in the Shock land here, and then we can make a 3/3 Shark token to eat the Burning Tree in combat. Now, we could have gone to Fairy Tuck the Chain Whirler there, but since we have another Teferi in hand, it just gets us another card deeper. They'd probably have to take their turn off attacking the Teferi anyway, so it kind of time walks them in that way a little bit. We can now trade off with the Burning Tree, and then the 3/3 will survive next turn to be able to chump block the Chain Whirler if we need. Okay, they have a Bonecrusher to kill Teferi. Oh, and an Anax. Okay, that's a bit rough. So here, I think I'm going to go to Fairy and minus on the Anax. And now we could cycle Shark Typhoon for 1 for a chump blocker, but we'll see what they do. If they attack here first, I think I'm probably not going to do that because that might signal that they have Embercleave. I definitely want to play around Embercleave here, so we could have cycled the Shark Typhoon. Oh wow, but they did actually have it, so I'm very glad that we didn't get greedy with the Shark Typhoon there. And now we can make an even bigger Shark token this turn. You know, that's the other advantage of waiting there and chump blocking with the 3/3, is that now we can make a huge Shark token. I'm happy to just fire off the Leyline Binding now, because then we can just make, what would it be? 1, 2, 3, for like a... What is that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, an 8/8 Shark, which is going to be very difficult for them to attack past unless they top deck another Embercleave. I mean, they do have an Anax on top, which is a little bit scary, but... Okay, they just go for Bone Crusher. And the Chain Whirler as well, okay. I mean, thankfully Teferi still survives here. We'll cycle the Shark Typhoon for 7 here. Then we'll plus. Okay, Ottawara is actually pretty nice here because, you know, we can tap down one of their creatures and bounce the other one, and we can actually start attacking with the Shark token now. And since we have Hall of Storm Giants, you know, they have to keep a creature back to block with as well, because we can animate Hall and attack with the 7/7 as well. Now we can tap down the Bone Crusher Giant. Wow, they attack us. I mean, I'm happy to just fire up the Hall of Storm Giants here. Yeah, okay, nice, we got there. So here, you know, against Aggro, same sort of sideboarding. Lyra's in, Supreme Verdict in, Fragment Reality in, cut Veto, cut Azcanta, and probably cut Seek New Knowledge as well. You know, Archmage's Charm, especially if they've got Embercleave, is important as a way to counter that. And we can also steal their 1/1s, their 1-mana creatures, if we need to. So yeah, I like this sideboarding. You know, being able to cheat in not Baneslayer Angel, Lyra here would be sick. You know, as a way to just put the game out of reach. They are more of a creature-based version, but they are running Bone Crusher Giant, so they do have some amount of reach in the late game. I mean, I think this is a little bit slow, but we have Leyline Binding and Archmage's Charm as interaction. We do have a Triome, so Leyline Binding just instantly gets reduced to 3 mana. We would love it to be 2 mana so that we have a play, you know, an interactive play on turn 2. Okay, I mean, we do have another Triome, so it will be reduced down to 2 mana, but we won't be able to cast it next turn, unfortunately. They play the Burning Tree. Okay, they have nothing else, which is pretty huge. So I think we're just going to play the Spyro's Headquarters. Now Leyline Binding goes down to 2. Divine Purge is a great draw here as well, because we can just sweep their board next turn. Okay, they got Burning Tree. Wow, and Anax. So they, even though they mold a lot, they did have a pretty sick curve out. I mean, thankfully we have Divine Purge, which is just going to slow them down massively here. Okay, they got Chain Whirler. I mean, we've got Leyline Binding to deal with that. And Kaleem, okay. I mean, there is an argument to holding onto this Triome as a way to cycle, but we have a lot of gas in our hands, so I think we're better off just playing it here. And I think I'm happy to tap down the Chain Whirler. Now, this might be a little bit greedy if they have something else, but we still have Leyline Binding for 1 mana now, so even if they do play something else, we could just Leyline Binding it. Which I think we will here. And now we can Wandering Emperor next turn. Oh, okay, Teferi's a nice draw. So I think I prefer going Teferi over Wandering Emperor, and I think I like going Teferi plus rather than Tuck, because, you know, it's not gonna... They're not going to be able to kill Teferi unless they draw exactly like a Robber of the Rich or Bone Crusher off the top. And we have Wandering Emperor to exile it next turn, so... Plus, if we minus, we risk Teferi just dying here. I would much rather plus Wandering Emperor there, Chainwhirl the next turn, and then we've also then got Archmage's Charm up. I mean, maybe that was a little bit greedy, but especially with Kumano faces Kakazan in the exile, they have a guaranteed way to kill Teferi anyway, so... Oh wow, okay. I mean, Lyra's a sick draw here, surely we just have to play that. Then we can go Lyra and keep up Archmage's Charm as well off the Teferi untap here. So yeah, we're in a pretty sick spot now. I mean, even if we just had Wandering Emperor, that would be hard for them to beat. Yeah, okay, nice. Okay, so we're going first here. And I can't keep a one-lander, unfortunately. This one, I think we can keep. I'm just trying to think what we want to put back here. I definitely think we want to keep Leyline Binding, and Seek New Knowledge is pretty appealing when we have so many lands, so it's just between putting a land back and Dovin's Veto. I think, with Seek New Knowledge, I think I'm happy to put back Veto against the Gigantha deck. The only way I might regret that is if they're on Niv, but for the most part I think Gigantha is more likely to be Wizards from what I've seen. And Dovin's Veto isn't the best against Wizards. Okay, Spikefield Hazard. Still not 100% sure what the opponent's on, but my guess would be Wizards. Yeah, okay, so they are on Wizards. Gonna lead on the Seek New Knowledge here, see what we hit. I think we'll put back the Shark Typhoon. Leyline Binding and Divine Purge are nice because they're immediate answers for the Dreadhorde Arcanist. I'm going to fire off the Leyline Binding now just because they might have Spell Pierce in the main deck, and having Leyline Binding countered there would be kind of a disaster. You know, Arcanist is one of the best cards in their deck, so I want to get rid of that immediately if I can. Okay, they have Balmor, and they pass with a Mana Open. I mean, even though they could have a Spell Pierce, I think they're unlikely to have it super high numbers game 1. I think that's more likely to be like a Play with Fire or Consider, so I'm just going to fire it off now. And now, next turn, I'm kind of hoping that they just play one creature and then we can just go to Fairy Tuck. I mean, to be honest, the fact they fire off Play with Fire there is a good sign, because if we do go to Fairy Tuck, that's probably one less burn spell that they can pick off to Fairy with. So we'll see what they do here. I mean, Wizards in general can be a scary deck, especially game 1 when we don't have as much removal. So, yeah, like I said, they did play a creature, so especially now they're tapped out, I'm happy to go to Fairy minus. Now, Reckless Charge is a scary card, because even if they don't have a burn spell, they could just go, creature, Reckless Charge, attack to Fairy down, which would be pretty problematic. Okay, they do have Symmetry Sage. Do they have the Reckless Charge? Well, they go face with Static Discharge, so they must have a Reckless Charge or another burn spell here for that to make sense. Okay, yeah, they Wizards Lightning into Fairy, sure. So, okay, Kaleem's not a bad draw here. Got 3 cards in the graveyard, so definitely going to play Search for Azcanta here. And we could hold on to this land for Seek New Knowledge if we draw that, but I think, 6 lands, is probably, I want to have at least 6 lands in play before I start doing that for the most part, I think. So I'm not going to fire off the Kaleem until they go to combat, because they could flash back the Reckless Charge here for another 3 power. This is a really nice thing about Kaleem. We don't even have to worry about counter spells here. We can just tap down the Symmetry Sage, stop them getting in for 6, which is a huge amount of damage. Like, that's really important. And now Azcanta should help us try and hit more removal spells, hopefully. Okay, they fire off another Static Discharge, so that's 4 damage to the Dome, down to 11. So we really need to hit another removal spell here if we can. Wow, and another Wizard's Lightning. So, okay, definitely don't want to land. Oh, okay, Kaleem, that's great. That's really good. So, I think... Just trying to debate whether to play this land out. With Search for Azcanta flipping soon-ish, I don't mind playing an extra land out here, because then we can potentially play more stuff off the Azcanta land as well. So even though we could flip the Azcanta here, I want to hold on to this Kaleem to guarantee tap down one of their creatures. So we're going to use Kaleem to tap down one of their creatures, which will guarantee Azcanta flipping next turn. Just debating whether we want an extra land here. I think, like I said, with Azcanta flipping, I quite like it, because then we can activate the Azcanta and hopefully play what we hit off it as well. Okay, they've got Iteration here. So, I mean, we'll see which creature's biggest. We're just going to tap down whichever has more power going into their combat step, I think. And then, as Cantor should flip... Oh no, hold on. Is that lethal? Okay, so that's... I mean, we're going to Kaleem now, I think, just in case we draw an Archmage's Charm to stop the static discharge. But that's kind of a disaster. I think that's... Oh, okay, hold on. We could hit another counterspell off this Seek New Knowledge. And Seeking doesn't change the top card either, so we should still have Kaleem available for next turn if we do. That's not going to do it. Okay, that was pretty unfortunate. I think static discharge, or a burn spell in general, is the only thing we're losing to there, really. Just trying to think if there's any one mana. Like, we don't have Fragment Reality in the main deck, so. And if their Symmetry Sage didn't have Trample, we could cycle this to make a 1/1 and block. But I don't think there's anything here that can save us, unfortunately. So that Static Discharge was a pretty good draw for them. Although having said that, I think they also win with Wizard's Lightning, right? Because they're 2 damage over, so Wizard's Lightning would have also done it for them there. So that kind of sucks. We did get close to stabilising. I mean, thankfully we have Baneslayer Angel in the sideboard to gain us life back. We also have Wandering Emperor that we never drew that can gain us life back as well. Because that is one of the concerns, you know, this particular build is pretty effective at stabilising against Wizards, but, you know, once you have stabilised, they can still pick you off with burn spells, so... Same sideboarding as usual against Aggro. Cut Veto, cut Seek New Knowledge, cut Cantor, bring in Fragment Reality, Lyra, and Supreme Verdict. And this is really a matchup where we would love to combo Lyra into play early. You know, I've beaten Wizards decks in the past by going... Oh, well, we have to mulligan this. But yeah, I've beaten Wizards in the past by going, you know, turn 2, Leyline Binding, turn 3... Fragment Reality at the end step, and then you just start attacking with a Lyra on turn 3 on turn 4. Really powerful. So this is definitely a keep. I'm just trying to think what to put back here. Potentially thinking Shark Typhoon, but also maybe thinking Like Supreme Verdict is good if we can keep drawing lands, but I'm worried that we might not keep hitting lands. Now, shocking in the land unnecessarily could be problematic, but if they don't have a 1-mana creature, that's giving us enough time. If they do, I want to be able to... Yeah. So I shocked in the land because I want to be able to Fragment Reality their 1-drop and then still cycle a Shark Typhoon or a Kaleem next turn. And it's interesting here which one to go for because, I mean, if they go, like, 1-drop into Reckless Charge, we're almost certainly going to go for Kaleem, but... If not, there's definitely an argument to cycling Shark Typhoon here to try and save Kaleem to tap down a creature if they play one this turn. If not, then there's an argument to cycling Kaleem so that Shark Typhoon can make a token once we have access to more mana. But again, if we are going to make a 1/1 Shark token next turn, we have to shock in Watery Grave, which isn't great. So I think here I'm just going to cycle the Kaleem. We want to try and get Kaleem into play as quickly as possible if we can. Okay, and... Even though we can make a 1/1, I don't think, you know, we're already down to 13. I don't think we can really afford to shock a land in here, really. And now, overall, even though we have drawn a ton of Shark Typhoons, I'm kind of happy in a way that we put back the Supreme Verdict. Actually, no, I mean... Like, I'm only saying that because we've been missing land. We haven't hit our 4th land drop yet, but with 3 Shark Typhoons, I would happily trade on him for a Supreme Verdict, I think, but... We'll see how it plays out. Okay, interesting. No creature off that land is huge for us. So we'll cycle away the Shark Typhoon for 0 just to try and draw another land, which we hit. Okay, sick. Oh, and Wandering Emperor is great. That's a way for us to gain potential life. And we now have more protection against creature into Reckless Charge. Which is pretty important here, to be honest, because they can, you know, that's the real threat of this deck. They can just force tons of damage through, even if they don't, you know, from a completely empty board state. Okay, they shock in a Steam Vents. So I want to try and save this Wandering Emperor to exile the creature if possible. So if they pass without doing anything here, I'm just going to Shock Typhoon. Trying to think what they could have. It must just be burn spells, right? If they've shocked in that Steam Vents, or counter spells, I guess. Maybe they're just sitting on like Mystical Disputes and Spell Pierces, maybe. Which is like where Shark Typhoon and Kaleem getting around that is pretty huge. Okay, Archmage's Charm is really nice here. So I think I'm definitely going to play the land in untapped. And since we have a Wandering Emperor in hand, I think I don't mind attacking here. You know, even though in general you want to have good defense, we have Archmage's Charm to steal 1-drops, we have Wandering Emperor to exile creatures, we can potentially make another Shark token, so I'd rather get in for damage here while I can. If I didn't have all that available, you know, especially if I didn't have Wandering Emperor in hand right now, I would definitely keep it back on defense. But because we have so many good ways to protect against their attacks, I think I like attacking here, just because, you know, they're already down to 14 here. Oh wow, they use Ottawara, okay. I mean, is that what they shocked in the Steam Vents for? I wonder what else they could have in hand if that's the best play they have. Maybe they just don't have any creatures. Looks like that could be the way. So they channel a Sokenzan. And again, I want to try and save this Wandering Emperor to exile the creature, because the 2 life that you gain off it is really huge. So we can just cycle the Shark Typhoon here. Eat one of these 1/1s in combat. And then we've got Kaleem that we're drawing next turn. Wow, they don't have a burn spell or any way to kill the 2/2, which is huge. Okay, we draw another Wandering Emperor. I think at this point, since they already have a 1/1 in play, I want to keep this 2/2 back on defense. So it looks like they must just not have any creatures. Maybe killing that first... They just kept a hand off the back of Symmetry Sage and they haven't drawn any more, maybe. Okay, they Wizard's Lightning the 2/2. I'm very happy to see that. And then we can Kaleem here, tap down the 1/1, and then we'll still have Archmage's Charm up for their main phase 2, which is really nice. And then we can get back Kaleem off the next activation, which is huge. So I'm just going to draw 2 here, get us closer to that Kaleem. Okay, they do have Spell Pierce, so kind of getting a better picture of their hand now. I think they must have just kept a hand with Symmetry Sage as their only creature, and then they just haven't drawn another one. They've just drawn burn spells and counter spells by the looks of things. Okay, there's a Balmor. Maybe they play Reckless Charge now? That could be another card they've had dead in hand, because they have had quite a slow start this game. Yeah, okay, so they must have had no creatures but with Reckless Charge. So they could flash back the Reckless Charge, or they could also put Gigantha into hand here. So we're definitely going to flash in the Wandering Emperor, and now we can also play around Spell Pierce, which is nice. So definitely going to exile the Balmor here, which will gain us 2 life as well, which is pretty huge. Okay, they Wizard's Lightning the Wandering Emperor, which does increase the power of their token to a 3/1, but it also means they don't get to put Gigantha into hand, which is really nice. I'm just going to... I think I'm happy flashing in Wandering Emperor here. Just to guarantee gaining another 2 life, and so they don't have another target for the Reckless Charge. And if they do draw another creature, they can go creature, Reckless Charge, but we have Leyline Binding for it. Yeah, if we didn't have Leyline Binding in hand, I think I would have just kept hold of the Wandering Emperor here to deal with the creature they draw off the top. But now the opponent's basically out of gas now. They still have access to Gigantha, but I think we're just so far ahead now. And we're at a relatively high life total where we don't have to worry about it. Another Leyline Binding is sick, and it only costs 1 mana at this point as well, so I really like our spot here. We can start making tokens off the Wandering Emperor now. Oh, okay, maybe not anymore, but still got Leyline Binding for Gigantha. Just got to hope to draw something like a Teferi or a... I mean, I guess we've got Kaleem on top, so we can get that into play next turn. Okay, so they play Gigantha. Oh, they drew another Reckless Charge. Okay, I mean, we can just Leyline Binding that. Definitely don't want to use Fragment Reality on a Gigantha if we can avoid it. And now, even if they draw another creature here, we're not too worried, because we can Fragment Reality our own Leyline Binding for a Lyra, and we have Kaleem to tap down their Balmor next turn. We can start attacking with the Lyra immediately here. And then we can just pass the turn. So yeah, we're in a great spot now, because we're going to get back Kaleem as a creature anyway, and then we're threatening lethal. Yeah, so we just win here. We tap down the Balmor, get a creature in play, and then we've got 10 damage in the air. Okay, sweet, nice. So, I mean, that game was a bit weird. I think their hand was kept off the back of them protecting the Symmetry Sage, but we had the Fragment Reality immediately. So, now obviously game 3 is going to be a lot harder. We're going second. And for Wizards, that was a surprisingly slow hand. I mean, again, I think they kept Symmetry Sage, Spell Pierce, Reckless Charge probably, and so us exiling it with Fragment Reality probably really slowed that hand down a lot. So this hand I think is fine. You know, we've got a turn 2 Leyline Binding, which is nice. So we can play the Rafine's Tower, and then we could shock in the Breeding Pool, which would reduce the cost of Leyline Binding down to 2. Then we've got Archmage's Charm, can potentially steal a Soulscar Mage or counter something else. Okay, they just attack for 1, which is good to see. So now we can shock in the Breeding Pool. Like I said, Leyline Binding goes down to 2 mana. Okay, they play with fire. I'm kind of surprised they didn't play with fire pre-combat to give Soulscar Mage more prowess, but I guess, you know, maybe they're worried that we're going to play something they might want to use play with fire on. So they attack. I mean, if they don't boost the Soulscar Mage's power here, I think we're just happy to let the damage through, because I would quite like to, you know, save Leyline Binding for a Dreadhorde Arcanist or something like that. If they counter the Leyline Binding here, then we can just steal the Soulscar Mage with Archmage's Charm, and they do, so trying to think whether we want to do it now or whether we want to hold it up for next turn. I think I'm happy passing, because, you know, if they do have something like a Dreadhorde Arcanist, I would rather have the option to counter that with the Archmage's Charm. If they don't boost the Soulscar Mage power again, I think I'm happy to just try and steal it during the end phase. If they do fire off some instants and sorceries now, we can just steal the Soulscar Mage in response. So even though this is a bit risky because they could have Mystical Dispute or Spell Pierce, I think I'm going to let them scry first, just because they might keep a card on top that, like a Reckless Charge that they would want a creature for. And again, you know, this does expose us to Spell Pierce or Mystical Dispute, but okay, they have a Wizard's Lightning, but I think it's better because they probably wouldn't have fired up. Oh wow, okay, we're at a pretty low life total now, but they potentially wouldn't have fired off all those burn spells had we stolen the Soulscar Mage previously. They might have also bottomed the card that they topped. Since we have Shark Typhoon to block if they do have a hasty creature, although there's no way they have, you know, they'd need creature plus Reckless Charge to do that. So we can pretty confidently attack. So they put Gigantha into hand here. Cycle the Shark Typhoon for 2 here. Okay, Divine Purge is interesting. So, even though I don't love it because it means that we're probably going to have less mana available into the opponent's turn, I'd like cycling the Triumph first just to get more information. Okay, Archmage's Charm is nice here because now we can steal the Symmetry Sage potentially. Could bluff an attack with the Soulscar Mage, but I don't think there's much point really. Okay, another Soulscar Mage, interesting. Okay, and a Fragment Reality. So I think I'm just going to pass here because, you know, we can Fragment Reality one creature and steal the other. It just depends on what they draw here, really. Okay, they Static Discharge. So I think I'm happy countering the Static Discharge here because, you know, we don't want to go down to 3, basically. I feel like we're at a decent point stability-wise. We just don't want to go within range of just dying to burn spells here if we can avoid it. Oh, perfect. That is literally the perfect card to stabilize us here. But yeah, I mean, either way, the other big downside of letting Static Discharge specifically resolve there is that the next one will deal even more damage, whereas now it won't. Okay, sick, we got there, nice.